Okay, good evening, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. We are starting on time for once, which is kind of rare for this Tech Thursdays show. So for those of you that are new, this is the Tech Thursdays weekly show where we talk about all things PC DIY in the tech world. This is primarily for PC gamers, but it can also include console gamers, but it also includes a lot of power users. So if you're a power user, someone who uses a lot of compute power, you build high-end systems that are not necessarily just for gaming, this is probably the right place for you. So this is going to be Tech Thursdays episode 116. So I can't believe we've been doing this long, but the summer is now upon us, and there's not a lot of new hardware releases, but what this does allow for me, it allows me to cover things that are less talked about in the tech world. So one of those things is, if you saw this week's video back on Tuesday, I did a video on Thunderbolt 5. So this, because there's not a lot of new GPUs or anything to talk about, I can revisit topics that I don't see a lot of coverage on in the tech world. And one of those topics is Thunderbolt. So Thunderbolt 5 is the latest revision of Thunderbolt, and it allows for a lot of high-speed interconnect between external peripherals that are Thunderbolt capable and your PC or your laptop, provided you have a Thunderbolt 5 capable device. So it's also backwards compatible with Thunderbolt 4, but that's one of the things that we're going to talk about on this stream. Everything about Thunderbolt, everything you need to know. So it's kind of like an add-on to, or I guess an appendix to the video that I put out earlier this week on and I have the box here, the Thunderbolt 5. So this is the Thunderbolt, it's the ASUS Thunderbolt EX5 add-in card for Thunderbolt 5 capable devices for desktop computers. So if you haven't checked out that video and you're interested in learning more about Thunderbolt in general, go ahead and check out that video. It is very similar to the video that we did last year on, wait for it, USB4, because we also did cover USB4, the add-in card from ASUS, about a year ago now, and it's very, very similar in terms of the capabilities. We also looked at Thunderbolt 4, but that was a few years ago. So I guess let's go ahead and get started. How's everybody doing? Hey, Steven, just finished upgrading the Aurora 16. Oh, and for those of you that are new, feel free to ask tech-related questions. Sometimes, if there's a lot of messages, I won't see it, but, anyone who super chats, their tech question will be answered live. So just keep that in mind. And depending on the content of the question, it could end up becoming its own video if the topic is deemed really, really good in terms of the technical content. So just something to be aware of. In terms of other news besides Thunderbolt, there's some GPU. There are some rumors about the RTX Super, the 50 series Super stuff. That's probably going to come out in Q1 of next year. If it does come out this year, it'll be at the very, very end of this year. So when I say very end, I mean December at the earliest. So just keep that in mind. If you're someone who is interested in the RTX 50 series Super revisions, those will come out early next year or at the very end of this year. And then for those of you waiting for the new AMD flagship, we talked about that last week. The next generation AMD graphics cards are due for the holiday season of next year. So that is literally like a year and a half away. So if you're looking for something that is Team Red, that is faster than the RTX 5090, you will be waiting for about a year and a half. Just FYI. Okay, so that covers the GPUs. We'll also talk about, because for those of you in the US, tomorrow is Independence Day, and there are a lot of tech deals from a lot of the news, or not news, from the tech stores, like Micro Center in particular has a lot of good deals. We'll look at some of those if we have nothing else to talk about. But, not all the viewers are based in the US, so that we'll probably kind of save that toward the end of the stream. Can we talk about 8K builds? We can talk about 8K builds. that definitely seems like something for a creator-based use case. I don't consider 8K builds gaming capable. Those would be more of like someone who's into like art creation, or someone who's doing something with like high fidelity video editing or rendering or things along those lines, or maybe even like CAD use cases. That could be 8K build, but that's definitely not a gaming focused thing. All right, I guess that pretty much covers it. So let's get into some of the articles. So I did go to Micro Center today. I talked with the Micro Center sales team. We're not going to talk about the deals, but I found some very interesting anecdotal information, if you will, from Micro Center, the salespeople on the floor, day in, day out, in the trenches, selling the CPUs and the GPUs and everything related to building a PC. And you can see there's a July 4th deal for the PNY GeForce RTX 5090 that we have showcased on this channel. The stream where we featured Doom: The Dark Ages was utilizing this very PNY RTX 5090 card. And yeah, they've got it on a July 4th deal for $2,500, which, if you can consider $2,500 a deal, then that shows how far we've come in terms of GPU price hikes. But they gave me some interesting info, so let me bring up Paint here. So they told me that Ryzen sells about 80-20 ratio compared to its competitor. So you know what that means, right? That means, you know who the competitor is in this regard, Intel. Intel sells about 20 to 80 ratio. So that basically means if you reduce those fractions, what does that mean? That means Ryzen is outselling Intel 4-1. AMD outsells Intel 4-1 in the consumer space. In the DIY space, I should say. This doesn't count pre-builds, because we all know that Intel oversaturates the pre-build market. That's how Intel makes the bulk of their sales, is by selling into laptops, selling into your boutique sellers like Origin, and I'm forgetting some CyberPower PC and some of those other guys. That's how Intel's fighting back. They're that's how they always operate. But yeah, Intel sells 1 to 4. So yeah, so basically 4 out of 5 PC DIYers are choosing AMD. We'll say PC DIY, PC do-it-yourselfers are choosing AMD over Intel. This is unprecedented. This has never actually happened before. The last time this happened was like 2005, 2000. It was like 2004, 2006 timeframe. That was the last time this was actually happening. So this is, in the consumer desktop world, this is devastating to Intel. We're going to talk about Microsoft and Intel in a little bit here. Intel in terms of the foundry, the 18A, and how it's not doing too well. There's more bad news there. And then we're going to talk about Microsoft laying off a bunch of people, particularly Xbox people, because Xbox is struggling to sell. And they're having to restructure their business model a little bit while they're doing their Xbox everywhere approach. So, yeah, AMD is doing pretty well in the CPU space. I can tell you that AMD, there is a lot of momentum. There is a lot of forward momentum for AMD in the enterprise space right now. In the data center world with the EPYC CPUs, there's a lot of interest in AMD, and I've never seen it this crazy. Like, I don't know what happened. The only thing I can think of is Intel somehow dropped the ball and fell way behind, like somehow. Like, I don't know. I can't explain that. I'm not someone from Intel that can tell you the exact story and the reasons of why that happened. The fact that Pat Gelsinger was let go last year was very telling of the situation that they're in. They're not in a very good situation. The best GPU that we got from Intel this year, or actually it was very late last year, it was December last year, was the Arc B580, which it can't even compete with what it was supposed to compete with, which was the RTX 4070. So the B580 doesn't even come anywhere close. So in fact, Intel might, there are rumors that Intel might release a new GPU, like a higher end GPU. I know they're going to launch professional GPUs with a lot of VRAM this summer, like literally this month. So that's nice, but those are not going to perform faster than a B580. So the best Intel can do is a GPU that can get close to matching an RTX 4070. That is a hypothetical GPU. That's the rumored Intel flagship graphics card. I've said this over a year ago. So those of you that have been watching my stream, this series for a while, you guys are, this is going to sound like a broken record at this point, but I already estimated more than a year ago, this is probably a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years ago now, I estimated that Intel's best GPU can rival the RTX 4070. And now all the analysts, all the rumors are basically saying what I said almost 2 years ago, if this hypothetical GPU actually exists internally within Intel. So I don't know what they're going to do. It's kind of weird. There's not a lot of interest in their AI parts, like their Gaudi 2 and all those things. I don't see a lot of their customers seriously considering those in large volumes. Meanwhile, I see AMD ramping up to go toe-to-toe with Nvidia next year. And next year, guys, those of you who are not aware, next year is going to be the massive, massive GPU war. Begun the AI wars have, we've said this like 2 years ago, but next year is going to be the big battle. Next year is going to be the big showdown. So 2026 will be the, well, I was going to say the War of the Worlds. That makes no sense. 2026 will be the epic showdown between Nvidia and AMD. GeForce versus Radeon. This is gonna be like Cell and Goku in the Cell games. It's gonna be insane. The matchup's gonna be so back and forth. It's going to be the RTX 60, not the 5090, the 6090 versus the next gen AMD flagship representing Radeon. Basically the secret underdog. Those of you that watched Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, it's like when Zordon and Alpha were secretly designing the White Ranger in secret. This is like the White Ranger is coming in to do battle against the evil Lord Zed or whatever. Whatever analogy you want to use, this showdown is going to take place next year. The UDNA, if that's what it's going to be called, the UDNA. So this is going to be the epic showdown. 2026, the end of 2026 is going to be when this plays out. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen in Intel. There's multiple problems. There's a lot of problems. Right now, another thing... Where should I put this? Just put this somewhere here. There's a couple of things happening. ARM is taking over the enterprise business or like telecom space slowly. This is scary for Intel. This is devastating and this is scary. This is basically a virus that has been growing behind the scenes, away from the consumer's eyes, and Intel is in a very weak position right now to deal with this. Last year, we saw the Snapdragon laptops from Qualcomm. That was an attempt to bring ARM back into the consumer space in something other than smartphones. But what most people are completely unaware of is When I'm talking about ARM taking over enterprise telecom space, what am I talking about? I'm talking about network equipment, routers, switches, Wi-Fi access points. These devices that the average PC gamer barely even thinks about, these devices typically, historically, they all feature Intel x86 CPUs. Historically, all this equipment belongs or is powered by Intel CPUs. But you know what's happening? ARM is taking over. Like when Palpatine tried to tell Anakin, the Jedi are taking over. Something's happening. ARM is taking over. This is very, very scary. This is very, very devastating. Anyone at Intel who is aware of this, and they are aware of this, this is the thing that keeps them awake at night. This is more of like, oh, this is a thorn in their side that's slowly getting worse. But this is a massive gaping hole that I don't know how they're going to dig themselves out of that one. Because that is not an easy problem to fix. This, they can just, copy AMD and make faster CPUs or whatever next year, or whatever they want to do. I don't know how they're going to recover from this. If you're big customers that make network equipment, what are give me some examples of the customers that do this. Let's name some. Someone give me a name of a company that represents this stuff down here, that makes this network equipment that's historically reliant on Intel x86 CPUs, but now they're switching to ARM-based CPUs, aka Qualcomm. TP-Link is an example. That's not the answer I was looking for, but I'll take it. ASUS. Verizon's not a hardware vendor. Verizon's a service provider. I'm talking about people who actually build routers and switches. Cisco, that's a very good answer. That's one of the big ones. Cisco. Okay, well, these are some examples. There's more. We'll put some more. Arista, Juniper, Dell, EMC, HP Enterprise, or HPE, Netgear, TrendNet, I think is another one. I mean, there's a bunch. There's a whole bunch. So, I mean, but you guys get the picture. These companies are multi-million dollar, some of them are multi-billion dollar revenue companies that are heavily invested.
I only got my 5090 for 5 months. Can you let me enjoy it before mentioning 6090 Tears of Joy?
Well, the 6090 is not coming out for another year and a half, so you still have, plenty of time. You still have like 18 months. A year and a half's a long time. Things could change, but that's pretty much the roadmap track for now. But anyway, the point is these companies spend millions of dollars on Intel CPUs and Intel network interface cards and those type of devices that Intel makes. Imagine now that they don't need to rely on Intel. You guys remember, who started this trend? Who is to blame if we have to put the blame on one company? Who do we blame as the trend setter? Who started this of abandoning x86 in favor of ARM? What company, and it's a very famous company, decided to leave Intel high and dry in favor of the ARM architecture? Who was the first company to do this and make a huge dent? Apple. Exactly. Apple started it, guys. It's all Apple's fault. I blame Apple. Apple started it because Apple went and started doing ARM in their laptops. And then you had companies like Amazon start playing around with developing ARM CPUs for their servers. But Apple was the trendsetter because they were openly, like, everybody knew what they were doing. Everyone knew, oh, look, you don't need x86 instruction sets to get good performance on a compute device, in this case, a laptop. So that was like, hey man, if you can do that in a laptop, then like, why don't we do that in a router? Why don't we do that in a switch? We can reduce the electricity in our network equipment and potentially also the servers. But you know, that's not only is that a nightmare for Intel to deal with, that's also potentially a nightmare for AMD. But the thing, you think about the cost of the central offices, the data centers, the power budget is a high capex, recurring capex for, well, no, it's an OPEX, it's an operational expense, yeah, because it's like every month they have to pay their electric bill. So you can imagine if you can cut your power bill even by like 15%, you're talking about saving. And you're a global company running, or well, in this case, if you're a hardware vendor like these guys that I wrote down here, you can go ahead and say, hey, look, our next generation router is so much more energy efficient. You don't have to run the fan at 100%. So the network engineers inside the data center, they don't have to wear hearing protection all the time because it's not going to make that much fan noise. You know what I'm saying? So these are the sort of things that are like, these are significant threats to the x86 viability. So that we've talked about x86 in the past, and there's always the naysayers that are like, oh no, it's never going to go away. Well, you know what I say? Never say never, because, I mean, take any technology that was changed, like point and shoot camera, like film-based cameras. Film-based cameras they're still around, but they're extremely niche. Compared to digital cameras, the cameras in your phones, like how many people actually use film cameras? You know, like never say never, because it's like the film camera, that industry basically evaporated in the last 20 years. And maybe even maybe it's been a little longer than that now. But technology changes. Technology is a revolving door. It's always changing. So never say never. x86, 100 years from now, x86 could be completely, extinct. Or maybe even 50 years from now, who knows, with how fast technology changes. So this is the reason why it'll be very interesting to see how a company that is basically the sole patent holder of the x86 architecture, in this case Intel, how will they navigate this growing trend of abandoning x86 in this mass exodus in favor of a more energy efficient solution? Because as transistor densities get better, as node density gets better, ARM is going to get better and better and better in terms of the IPC, in terms of the compute capabilities, the T-flops, whatever you want to measure the compute power on ARM versus x86. Eventually, the emulation layers and all that stuff for the operating system. The fact that Microsoft is also giving so much in the way of supporting ARM with their Windows for ARM edition, and you can see that there's just so much development effort. Going back to what I said earlier, there's so much forward momentum getting behind ARM like this hype machine from the industry. When you have billion-dollar and multi-million-dollar companies investing in ARM, you know this means bad news for Intel long term. And thus we now understand why Intel's stock price is where it is, even though it's like, oh, they're only selling 1 to 4. Like, that doesn't justify why the stock price has been so low for so long. AMD is not to blame for this problem. It's everything outside of the consumer space that the PC gamers are unaware of. That is what's changing this. That is what's driving this. It's not the fact that everybody and their dog and their second cousin wants a Ryzen 9 9950X3D instead of getting one of these Intel Core Ultra CPUs. I mean, that's not the reason why Intel's struggling right now, even though that is a contributing factor. That is not the primary reason why they are struggling. Because like I said, in the consumer market, if you don't want to go and buy this Intel Core Ultra from Micro Center, some random PC gamer is going to buy a CyberPower PC pre-built online that has the Intel Core Ultra in it, and that's how Intel's going to get most of their sales, because the people who don't build their own PCs are probably going to end up with an Intel computer because they buy a pre-built, and they're going to think they're getting a good deal because the system integrators are having to offer lower prices on the Intel stuff because the Intel stuff's not selling that well relative to the competition. So that's the reason why Intel will still maintain themselves in the PC space. So I'm not worried about Intel. Like I said in a previous stream, when AMD is winning the industry overall, when the underdog is winning, the industry is in a better space. And AMD is still technically the underdog because they're still significantly smaller than Intel. So Intel's still the giant. They're still the 800-pound gorilla, but they have to deal with a bunch of other 800-pound gorillas now. Like they're having to fight a war on two fronts. For the longest time in the tech world, AMD is thought of as that small. I think of it like you have AMD, this little neutral country in the middle, and then you have this giant blue nation in the west called Intel. So you have, let's draw some borders here. So you have AMD is like this little nation. I think of Final Fantasy 12, to be honest. I think of Final Fantasy 12 lore. AMD is like Princess Ash's country. The Kingdom of Dalmasca. That's basically AMD in this analogy. Intel is the giant blue nation, the Rosarian Empire to the west, the mysterious Rosarian Empire that you barely ever get to see in the game. They're across like this desert sand area. And then to the east, you have the giant, massive, aggressive Arcadian Empire in the east. You have the Empire in the east, and they're doing battle. So AMD was like what I call the country that was fighting a war on two fronts, because they would fight a war here. They would fight a battle with Nvidia, and they actually kind of caused that war. They got involved in that war because they took over the tribe that Nvidia had fought with for generations, all throughout the 90s, all throughout the 2000s. That tribe was known as ATI, which is now part of AMD. AMD basically annexed them, and that's why now they're in direct war with Nvidia. But they have historically always fought the empire to the west. So they were this country, that's weird. They were basically this little kingdom in the middle, wedged in the middle between two giant empires to the east and west of them. That is how I've always viewed them internally. Like, I see them as this small little country that is constantly fighting a war against these two giant powers, one to their west and one to their east. So they fought a war on two fronts, and that's the reason why they were supposed to go bankrupt and go away in 2019, because these other two empires were much, much larger than their tiny little kingdom. But they somehow managed to survive. Now, what's happening is, it turns out there is another, I should probably erase this stuff over here, but there's another, yeah, we need to get rid of all of these guys. These guys don't need to be here anymore. Let's just get rid of them. I guess, unless I wanted to include them, but that's not correct. So now, it turns out, this was AMD, they were doing battle here and here, whatever, here and here. And then they do battle here and here. And then you have the Rosarian Empire in Team Blue over here. It turns out there's actually this really big other nation over here that has remained neutral for a very long time. And that is known as the ARM Nation. And yeah, these guys are now kind of like invading into this territory, aggressively taking market share in a lot of different areas. Oh, and by the way, there's actually a secret alliance between these two. The Empire, the Green Empire in the East, is secretly allied with the nation of ARM. But a lot of people aren't aware of that. So there's an alliance. So there's these two giant, massive powers that are basically going to strangle and crush these two guys in the middle here over the long haul. So that's how this war is going to play out in the tech space in the next 20 years. Just for those wondering. It's going to be interesting to see how much of this comes true, but we'll see what these two... Once upon a time, Intel and AMD were arch enemies, but now you see the enemy of my... What is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend or something? So it's like now the two of them are actually having to somewhat team up because there are far greater powers that threaten their survival. The Garlean Empire? You mean the Arcadian Empire for using... if you're talking Final Fantasy 14, then yeah. But I was talking Final Fantasy 12. You're enjoying this story? Yeah. This is actually how I've always thought of them, guys. I only recently became aware of ARM as a potential threat that will basically overwhelm Intel and AMD. But I don't know if that's exactly how it'll play out. This is kind of a future that... This is a potential future that we know about. Like, Nvidia and ARM are already allied. We already know that. Nvidia has the ability to make ARM-based CPUs. Now it's only a matter of if and when, if they decide to release those into the consumer space, because they already technically have those in the enterprise space. ARM has been sucking up to Intel since 1994. Well, that's because ARM was like their small little trade partner to the west of them. You see what I'm saying? You were a partner manager back then? Yeah, but see, so you could probably agree with me that this little analogy that I've created, treating these four organizations as though they were countries or empires, makes a lot of sense. It actually it's actually scarily accurate in some ways. So it's interesting to see how this is playing out, because you think about these companies 10 years ago, 2015, AMD was on a trajectory to go bankrupt and no longer exist in like 4 years. And Intel was stagnant and releasing quad-core 8-thread slop. We're getting our annual i7s from and i5s and i3s from Intel like every year a decade ago. ARM was nowhere to be found because they were like they were like a trade partner. They were like getting into smartphones. They were really like, they were taking off in the mobile space because people understood, oh, it's energy efficient because it's like low power. And then Nvidia was always kind of there as this empire that was getting more and more powerful and consolidating their power behind their software stack and their elite CUDA forces. So yeah, it's interesting to draw it out like this, because it actually makes a lot of sense when you look at it this way. And I don't think I've seen anyone explain it this way. You know, the back and forth between these, we call them companies, but it's more like they're organizational bodies that represent certain types of CPU technology, or I guess computer architectures. NVIDIA represents their CUDA architecture. Intel and AMD represent the x86 architecture, although Intel is the primary owner of that. AMD has a cross-license agreement. They're the only company that has managed to maintain that license agreement with Intel from that court ruling years ago. And then you have ARM, which is just kind of like sidestepping them and just competing with them directly now in terms of energy efficiency and rapidly gaining in terms of compute potential. So this is how it's going to play out. How x86 will survive remains to be seen. And I think that is the $1 million question, maybe the $1 billion question. Yeah, the history is an interesting one. But what I can tell you today from the anecdotal info that I got from the Micro Center sales team is currently in the DIY space, Ryzen outsells Intel Core by about 4-to-1. 4-to-1 ratio. Which means a lot of people like the AMD Ryzen brand right now, which is actually very good. Now, I asked the salesperson that I was talking to, how many of the sales are X3D versus the non-X3D? So if you could choose between an X3D, like this 9950 X3D, or a regular 9950X, I asked him, is the non-X3D, or how well is the non-X3D selling versus the X3D? And you guys are going to be surprised to hear his answer. His response was, it's actually kind of 50-50 split. I was expecting him to say that X3D is basically the majority of all the Ryzen sales, and that the standard Ryzens were not selling well. But that is not what he said at all. He told me that it's about 50-50 split, which means about half of the sales are X3D and the other half are non-X3D, which is very interesting. So it means that, well, he did tell me that one of the reasons why the non-X3D sells just as well as the X3D is because of the bundles. So a lot of people are buying the Micro Center bundles, and they've got some real good bundles on their non-X3D. So let's go ahead and look at some of these bundles. So this kind of like gives us a segue into the July 4th shopping deals. So here we go. This is Micro Center's website. So they've got a bundled deal where you can get a 9800 X3D, and you have, for $649, you get the CPU, a motherboard from ASUS, you get the ASUS TUF gaming Wi-Fi, and 32 gigabytes of G-Skill Flare X DDR5-8000. So you get some decent RAM. You know, this isn't some cheapo JDEC 4800 or whatever. No, this is DDR5-8000. I think it's CL32. So you could probably overclock it to cache latency 30 if you wanted. But this is a pretty good starter kit for $650, for less money than a PlayStation 5 Pro, and for like $50 more than the Mario Kart World Switch 2 bundle. You get a 9800 X3D with the 32 gigs of RAM, and you get a motherboard on top of that for that kind of money. So really the only thing that you would need to buy, assuming you're upgrading from an old computer, the only thing you would need to buy if you wanted to fully upgrade is a GPU, basically, and that's whatever GPU you can afford. So that's a pretty good deal. $649.99 for the 9800 X3D with motherboard and RAM. Now, if you wanted a better motherboard, because that is only a B650-E TUF Gaming, for $50 more, you could get an MSI X870E-P. So the nice thing about this motherboard has USB4 and Wi-Fi 7, whereas this motherboard over here does not have those things. So that is a nice upgrade. For $50 more, you're getting Wi-Fi 7. I don't think a lot of people with desktops care about Wi-Fi 7, though. They're most likely going to be using an Ethernet cable. But you're getting USB 4, which is a big deal. if you didn't even know you actually needed it. Because it's one of those things, I've gotten a couple of people have left comments on the channel saying, you know, like, this guy says things that I didn't even, or this guy answers questions that I didn't even know I needed to ask. You know, like, or it's like the motherboard has features that you don't even know that you actually need. You know, like, that's the thing. So for $50 more, so if it was me personally, I would go with this motherboard for $50 more because I want that USB4 versus, you know, this. So, I mean, if you wanted like a flagship, this is not a flagship board, but if you wanted an overclocker board with an external clock generator for B clock adjustment, overclocking, you could upgrade to the Asus X870E-E ROG Strix. This one has the external clock generator. This one also has the postcode debug. I don't think the MSI has the postcode debug, unfortunately. So actually, yeah, well, the thing is you can choose other boards and you're still going to get the bundle with the CPU and the RAM, but you're probably not going to get as good of a deal if you don't choose the motherboards that are included in the bundle. But yeah, that is a very popular bundle. That is their most popular bundle. Then they've got the Micro Center exclusive 7600X3D. For $400, you get the 7600X3D plus the same Asus TUF motherboard and then the same RAM. For only $20 more, you could upgrade to a B650-A. I don't know if that's worth it over the TUF. You'd have to look at what the difference is there. I personally don't think either of those motherboards are that good, but, you know, for about $400, you're getting everything you need to build the gaming PC except a GPU at this point. Like, assuming you have an older computer that you're upgrading, you're basically going to rip out the old guts and put this stuff in it. So then they have the 7800X3D bundle for $500. It's the same thing, just $500. So it's $100 more than the Ryzen 5 X3D. And then you have, okay, this is where things are like more into what I would actually get. So now we're into the 9950X3D. This is the real deal. This is the flagship CPU. This is the big one, the 9950X3D. This is the content creator's master PC. So this one, for $800, you get that MSI board. What I would do, I would probably go with that Gigabyte Aorus Elite, though, for $50 more. For $850, I would step up to the Aorus Elite Wi-Fi 7 because that has the postcode debug and that has the correct PCIe layout for what any sort of live streamer would actually want to use. So that one, this is what I call the live streamer bundle. 9950X3D with Gigabyte X870 Aorus Elite for $850, and you're still getting that RAM, 32 gigs of DDR5-8000 included, the 3-in-1. So that is probably a good deal. But here is where the non-X3D still makes up for the sales figures. Meaning, so far we've looked at X3D bundles, but now let's look at the non-X3D bundles. And this is the reason why they still, at least Micro Center, is still able to sell about 50% of their Ryzen sales are X3D, and the other 50% of their sales are non-X3D. And the sales guy told me that the 7700X is probably their most popular bundle for PC gamers. The gamers, not the content creators, not the live streamers, not the tech enthusiasts. Those guys are probably getting these higher end boards. But the typical gamer is probably going to go for that $349.99, the 7700X with the Gigabyte B650 gaming, it's in the name, Gaming X AX version 2 with that Flare X memory. And if they like Asus, for whatever reason, they can spend $50 more to step up to the B850 TUF gaming Wi-Fi. Why is that one? Okay, what I don't understand, I don't understand why the newer Asus, the B850 Tough, is part of the bundle for the 7700X, and these guys, these X3Ds, don't have that one. They have the older one. Sometimes I wonder how the product manager chooses like these bundles. Like, who is in charge of making these bundles, man? I want to make. I could make better bundles. This is like, what is this? Like, what? They're gonna like gimp the X3D motherboards, and they're gonna give like the non-X3 the actual better upgrade motherboards. Like, what? Anyway, but yeah, the 9700X for $429.99, you can step up from the 7700X to 9700X. So I'll tell you guys, like, I know at least 3 or maybe 4 people that I have helped upgrade throughout the course of like when Zen 5 launched last year up until now. I've probably helped them upgrade to this very bundle right here, the $429.99. There's at least 3 or 4 people that I have already helped them choose this $429 bundle, because this is a better long-term choice than this. Even though on paper it's like, oh, it's what, 50 plus, that's $80 more. You're spending almost $100 more, and the only difference is the 9700X. Well, yeah, the reason why the 9700X is better is because the 7700X, you try to cool this thing with an air cooler and it'll go to 95 Celsius in an instant as soon as you try to do a lot of like all thread workloads. 9700X runs so cold, it does not heat up, and the stock performance is a 65 watt. This is 65 watt TDP out of the box, whereas this is like a 95 watt. And this thing heats up so fast. This thing doesn't heat up and uses so much less power. And the gamers that I have helped decide how to upgrade their computers, they want a silent system, no noise. They want no liquid cooling, no worrying, no anxiety about the pump failing, no issues with leaks, no issues with like pump whine, which is a thing as the pump ages. They don't want any of that nonsense. They want practicality. They want reliability. They want uptime. They want that thing to last forever. So they demand air cooling. They demand it to be silent. They don't want to hear the CPU fan ramp up when they start up a game and it's compiling shaders. They want it to be dead quiet. This is requirement number 1. It must be silent. So for that reason, I tell them, get the 9700X bundle. This thing is a 65 watt power, or it's not going to pull power. You can stick a Scythe Fuma 2 on this thing, and it will be dead silent even when rendering videos in DaVinci Resolve. Cinebench runs, you aren't even going to hear it. Air cooling all the way. So this is the reason why this one is actually a really good bundle for the PC gamers. It is kind of like that nice mix of, you know, like it's less than a PlayStation 5, but this plus a GPU is going to outperform a PlayStation 5. Whereas if someone really wanted to spend, because you can look at the difference here, 9700X, $430. With a motherboard upgrade, you can get 460. So that's like barely for like $30 more, you get possibly a better motherboard. Although I don't like how it's still a B650. I would have liked this to be a B850 or an X870 or something. But compare that to X3D. Like the price of the X3D, $650. So you have to spend more than $200 more for that X3D. And a lot of gamers, they wonder, is it actually worth spending $200 more for X3D? Is X3D going to make that much of a difference to them compared to just saving that money and putting more money into the GPU, especially if they only game at like 1440p? So that's or even 1080p for some people. So that's the reason why this is actually a really, really good deal when it comes down to it. You can't stand the side of an air cooler in anything with a side panel window? Just think about a full tower as a sled on its side. Yeah, all the people that I helped with this decision, they all put their computers on the floor under the desk. So they're not looking at their computer. It's on a carpeted floor in like a dorm room. Just FYI. That's kind of how these people roll. So it's not like they're going to be like staring and oogling over their RGB in their computer. So it's all about the presentation and the practicality. It's that sort of thing. It's presentation versus practicality. In this case, these individuals were all about practicality, and it needs to be reliable. So air cooling all the way. It's dead silent. Air cooling also makes less noise than liquid cooling because there's less moving fans. And the entire build is much lighter. It's not as heavy because you don't have all those radiators. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, this 9700X is a really good one. 65 watt TDP. You could literally cool this thing. I mean, if you guys watched my the Tech Thursdays we did 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago we were featuring a 9700X on Tech Thursdays, and I literally had the basic AMD the Wraith Prism air cooler cooling the 9700X. That's the basic AMD cooler, and it was more than enough for the 9700X because the 9700X is 65 watt TDP, and the Wraith Prism is capable of handling up to 105 watt TDP. So that's the reason why, and it was dead silent. So it's like, yeah, man, this is actually a pretty good deal. 8 core, 16 thread, 32 gigs at 6,000 plus the motherboard. For under $500, that's a pretty good deal. Zen 5 architecture. Now someone's probably like, well, what about this one? This one's $350, and the only difference is it's Zen 4 versus Zen 5. Well, okay. I like to think of it like I would rather buy something that comes with features that I might not know that I need in the future. Because it's one of those things, it's always better to prefer to have something and not know you need it rather than to not have something when you actually need it. You know what I'm saying? The main difference, the 9700X, less power, better IPC performance, and the 9700X has the full fat AVX 512 pipeline for AVX 512 functionality. The 7700X can do AVX 512 workloads, but it is using like a 256 plus 256 double up. So that's definitely a very niche use case, which is probably not going to play into a consumer desktop everyday scenario. But like I always say, it's better to have something and not need it than to be in a situation where you actually need something and don't have it, or you're limited in some capacity. So I would go 9700X. I would spend the $80 more and get the current generation rather than buying last gen. I just don't like to buy last gen unless we're in a situation where the current generation is so new and there's a lot of like bugs with the beta BIOSes and all this stuff versus the last gen, so a prime example I'll give you guys is back when the 7000 series first launched, I was actually recommending, based on, people would come to me and they're like, hey, I need advice, I'm building a computer, and I would recommend AM4.
Air cooling is more than enough even for my 9950X3D. People promoting AIO should get a life. We didn't buy a 9950X3D and 5090 to run Cinebench all day.
Yeah, I appreciate the super chat. And that is true. You do not need a liquid cooler to cool a 9950X3D. That is true. You can get away with what I call a double skyscraper air cooler, which is something like an NHD15. That is more than capable of handling that CPU. But that's because the CPU itself doesn't use that much power. So I say that as somebody who actually cooled a 13900K with a Noctua D14 for like 2.5 years. In fact, it still has that air cooler to this day, and it's literally sitting right behind me. But yeah, I agree with you. You don't need AIOs. The reason why people would do AIOs, though, is for the looks. It's all about the aesthetics when it comes down to it. The performance while gaming is going to be identical. Liquid cooling is not going to give you guys better gaming performance versus air cooling because the gaming workloads don't, like what Super Googly just said to the point about Cinebench. Gaming workloads aren't going to stress the CPU in such a way that the liquid cooler is going to be better than the air cooler. Now, if somebody is doing all core workload and they're fully loading the CPU to 100%, like Cinebench, for example, which is not a real world thing, but if you're like rendering 4K, 8K videos or whatever, and you're really, really using the CPU to its fullest potential, then there is an argument to be made in favor of an AIO. But even then, the final results are not going to be that impressive compared to air cooling. So it'll be a little bit better, but it's not going to be that much better. So the reality is most people are the people who are going to build with an AIO, they're going to do that because they care about the looks. They care about the presentation of their build. They like being able to look at their memory sticks with the RGB. They like being able to look at the AIO's display on the pump housing, like whether they got one of those fancy infinity mirrors, like on the Kraken, or they got one of those ones from Asus. You know, the what are they called? The one that Asus has, the Ryujin. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they care about the actual look of it in a glass side panel. But that doesn't mean that an air cooler build doesn't look good with a side panel. I have ran multiple air-cooled builds for years with the side panel, and those builds still look good. There's something to be said for that big, giant hunk of aluminum sticking right there like a massive cube, knowing that that big block is soaking up all the heat from the CPU and keeping it cool. So, and you don't have to worry about the pump failing. You don't have to worry about the water levels decreasing as the AIO gets older. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. All my air coolers, some of my air coolers are more than like almost coming up on 15 years old. My Noctua D14, I've got like 3 of those. One of them is cooling a 13900K. That is a 300 watt CPU, and they all still work. And all the fans still work to this day. Those things are like 15 years old. So there is something to be said in favor of air coolers. Now, typically, if I'm recommending a gamer a PC build, now if there's someone who doesn't know a lot about computer hardware, I typically recommend air cooling for their build, regardless of what the CPU is. Even if a gamer wanted to buy a 9950 X3D, this $800 bundle, and they don't want to touch their computer, they're not going to mess with it, and they want it to be reliable, and they just want hands off, I would probably recommend an air cooler for them. It depends on what case they have. If it can fit the size of air cooler that I would recommend. Now, I would recommend a high-end air cooler for a 9950 X3. I'm not going to recommend some Evo, some Cooler Master Hyper Evo 212. I'm not going to put that on this thing, but it's going to be a high-end air cooler. One that can keep up with like a 280 millimeter radiator, or even outperform a 280 millimeter and get close to a 360 AIO in terms of performance. So that's typically what I recommend if I'm recommending air coolers for Ryzen 9 CPUs or even i9 CPUs. The two parts that are future-proof for most part are the air coolers and the power supplies. Those are the things in general. Yes, you can carry those over. Although the one thing I will say about air coolers, if you are on Intel does change their sockets quite often. So like I remember when the 12th gen came out, none of my air coolers worked with the Intel LGA 1700. I had to get the adapter kit for the Noctua, the ancient 10-year-old or 12-year-old D14, in order for that to fit on a 13900K or a 12700K. I had to actually get a bracket kit from Noctua. But sometimes they're good about selling those for free. So, but when it's really, really old and it's like you can't really provide proof of purchase anymore because you bought it from Fry's, they're out of business, and it's like 15 years old, like what are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? So, but Noctua's good, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, they do. Exactly. And that's exactly how I ended up cooling it. What's the best air cooler for micro ATX? It depends on the micro ATX case. It depends on how tall, how wide the case is. Because the best one's always going to be the big cubes. The big, what I call dual skyscrapers. Anything that looks like a D15, basically. So they've got, so yeah, this $429.99 bundle, this is like a really good game. This is like what I call the gamer. This is what I call the budget gamer. No, this is the budget gamer bundle. This is the mainstream gamer bundle. And then this one, these X3D ones are what I call the elite gamer bundle. And then these Ryzen 9s are this is like the best bundle. I don't know what to call it. The Ryzen 9 ones are like rare though. They're mostly like Ryzen 7 bundles. And then they've got, okay, so here we've got the other Ryzen 9s. These are the ones without X3D. So for $550, you can get a 9900X with that MSI board, or you can, this one actually has one of the best upgrades. Whoa, the 9900, it's so weird how the bundles are so random, like the upgrade options. So the 9900X, for $50 more, you can step up to an MSI X870E Mag Tomahawk. This is a very good motherboard. This one has the postcode debug and everything, and the SSDs are spaced out so they're not going to overlap with each other and overheat. So yeah, that's a good one. It has, yeah, because this one, the Pro doesn't have the postcode debug. The Tomahawk does have the postcode debug. So for $50 more, you get the postcode debug. So $600 for the 12-core, 24-thread with this board plus the 32 gigs. That seems like a pretty good one for productivity. The 9950X, this is literally what we're streaming on right this very second. Yes, we are streaming live to the internet using the 9950X, the non-X3D Zen 5 flagship. So this one, they've got a $700 bundle. And then for $50 more, you can get the Aorus Elite with the postcode debug and the proper PCIe layout. And then they've got what I call the uber budget builds, the uber budget gamers. So they've got the, last but not least, they've got the 9600X, the Ryzen 5s, for under $300. You can get a micro ATX motherboard. This is micro ATX, yeah, because it's got 2 PCIe. So micro ATX, the Asus B650M-A Prime AX2, what a name, with 16 gigabytes of DDR5 3-in-1 combo. So this is only 16 gigs of RAM, so probably the first thing I would do is get a second stick of RAM. But I want to mention one thing. Running one stick of DDR5 is not nearly as bad as running one stick of DDR4. So this is something that I want people to be aware of. Meaning, even if you only have one stick of DDR5, you're not going to suffer nearly as bad of a performance penalty running in single channel memory compared to the old DDR4. This is because DDR5 has 2 banks per stick, per rank. So you got 2 banks per rank. So it's kind of like a pseudo dual channel system using one stick of RAM. So this is actually not that bad. for like a starter PC. And the nice thing about these micro ATX motherboards, these are perfect for small form factor builds, which we don't really talk about on this channel that much. But if you wanted to do a small form factor build, you could do one for very, very cheap if you live next to a micro center, because you can basically build this for, I would say, like, assuming you already have the case. If you have to add the case, you're probably looking at like a $600 micro or like a $600 mini PC build utilizing this bundle, the 269 bundle, and then you'd have to add the case and then the GPU or whatever else. So probably around, I can imagine this thing paired up with like a 9060 or 9060 XT or something, but then that's probably going to balloon the budget up to like $800 and something at that point. And then we can go even further down with the last generation, the 7600X. This is what I call the debug build, meaning this is for someone who wants to like debug PCs. You have this kit available. So you've got extra parts. So like if someone's telling you they have a messed up computer, can you help troubleshoot? You have these extra pieces laying around. You have an extra motherboard to test with. You have an extra CPU to test with. You have a stick of RAM to test with. So this is what I call the debug build. I wouldn't recommend the 7600X build for, I mean, okay, technically, yeah, you can do a mini ITX, or not mini ITX, a small form factor build with this bundle. But at this point, if someone really is looking at one of these, I would recommend them to do the 9600X because that is the current generation versus 7600X, which is last generation. For those that don't know, the 7600X will become 3 years old in a few months. In September, this will turn 3, which means the 7600X will become a middle-aged CPU, so it will no longer be considered that powerful. And next year, there will be something that will be significantly faster than it. So that is the reason why I don't really recommend last-gen hardware, especially considering it's almost 3 years old at this point. And then last but not least, they have the Uber content creator / professional / prosumer. They have the big build. They've got the Threadripper bundle for $3,000. Yes, so for the price of an RTX 5090, you can get an entire Threadripper setup. You can get a 32-core, 64-thread CPU.
I was on the brink of hitting the button on the RTX Pro 6000 but decided to hold back and use that money as part of my purchase of a new Rolex.
Yeah, I really strongly do not recommend getting the RTX Pro 6000. Considering we were just talking about the RTX 6090, and that's about 18 months out, so yeah, I don't think that's a good use of the funds when it's only going to be top dog for less than 2 years, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, that's probably a good idea to hold back on that and use that for a Rolex, I guess. Yeah, this is actually a pretty good deal, guys. Like, honestly, if you do the math, so the Threadripper CPU, typically the initial price of this CPU was about $2,000. If I remember correctly, it was $2,500 for just the CPU. Now, the CPU price has come down over the years. So we can probably look into this bundle. Actually, let's look into this bundle. So they're saying, do they show individual? What's the individual price of this? Like, what is this? Yeah, see, so the original price was $2,500. So basically the price of an RTX 5090, but it is reduced by $250. So this is actually a very good bundle because the motherboard is like a $900 motherboard. The Sage. Yeah, this is a $900 motherboard. The Sage from Asus. This is the Workstation Professional TRX 50 Sage. This is a massive motherboard. Postcode debug down there at the bottom. Massive heat sinks. Active cooling on the VRM and the memory. Because you can see the memory. Single You've got one DPC quad channel right there. This is like massive. You got slim SAS. You've got all that SATA. You've got all those M.2s under there. You can run M.2s off of the slim SAS. You got dual power supply capability. This thing is balls to the walls, crazy. 10 gigabit plus 2.5 gig Wi-Fi 7, 20 gigabit USB-Cs, all those things. So yeah, this is fully loaded for a professional build. $900 plus about $2,500. That's already over $3,000. So this is a very good deal for $3,000. You're basically getting either of these two components at a reduced price, and then you're getting 128 gigabytes of registered DIMMs. This is the server grade memory. This is not regular consumer desktop unbuffered memory. This is registered DDR5, which is required for a professional build like this. So that memory is $650. So you're getting the RAM essentially for free. So yeah, this is actually a very good deal. This is why it pays to wait for these sort of things and not buy into this like day one. I didn't buy day one, but I bought around the launch time when I built my Threadripper system back in 2023. And if you guys watched the live stream when we built that system, that system is still my highest end system today. But I can tell you, it cost me. Now I didn't get this CPU. I got a lower end CPU. My CPU was about $1,500. So I paid about the same amount as this, probably a little bit more than this, because I wasn't getting the RAM for free. So yeah, this is a very good deal. This is a very good deal, actually. It looks very, very expensive, but compared to some of these, this is a real good deal. You're getting 128 gigs of registered DIMMs for free. Wow. That is like super high-end stuff right there. So for a pretty good deal. So all these are pretty good bundles. I would say probably the most popular one, well, you guys probably already know, the 9800 X3 up here at the top for $650. And then if they want to upgrade the motherboard, they can do that. But I personally think, this 9700X, the average gamer, I think this is the one that a lot of average gamers would go with. Either of these or any of these three. It depends on what they want to spend, like $350 up to $550, kind of that from like $300 to $600. Basically the price of a console, like PlayStation 5 is $500. The Nintendo Switch 2 is $550. So somewhere around there, that is kind of the new baseline for the PC gamer. And that's the reason why I think these bundles are priced really, really well for the gamers. Because they're still going to have to buy potentially a graphics card and maybe some other stuff if it's a brand new build. But I think this is a good starting point for most people. And hence, this is the reason why AMD is outselling Intel. Well, now we kind of have an idea of what the AMD bundles are. Now let's take a look at the Intel bundles and see how the Intel is doing. So Intel, they've got their Intel bundles. Bundle, build, and save with Intel. So they've got their most popular bundle is the Intel Core Ultra 7 265KF. For just under $500, you can get a Core Ultra 7 Arrow Lake with no integrated graphics because it is the KF. The F, I don't know exactly why they chose the letter F, but KF means no integrated graphics. So this is going to require the person buying this to already have a graphics card on hand just to make the system post because there's no integrated graphics. With those Ryzen bundles, they don't need the graphics card to verify that the components work. They just have to have a monitor to hook it up to via like HDMI or whatever. But this one does require an actual GPU, otherwise you cannot even use this. That's just one thing I wanted to point out because the KF does not have integrated graphics. but that is their most recommended Intel bundle. They also have the standard one for basically $500. So for $20 more, and I highly, highly recommend paying the $20 more for the integrated graphics, because if you don't have a graphics card and you want to test that this stuff's not defective out of the box, you need the integrated graphics. So for $20, you're getting integrated graphics. I think that is worth $20. So that is that. And then, okay, the same Asus Z890 white motherboard. So it's interesting because this comes with a white motherboard. So it's good. It's nice for people who are trying to do a white build, because, I mean, the white motherboard is included in the Intel bundle. So that is pretty nice that they did that. And then there's the option for the MSI upgrades, and go to the MSI for, what is that, like $60 more or $50 more. You get an MSI Pro Z890. I don't know if that's actually better than that Asus gaming Wi-Fi, though. Maybe it is. And then if you want to step up to the flagship, the big boy, the Core Ultra 9, the 285K, for $700, it comes with the Gigabyte Z890 Gaming X Wi-Fi. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention. The difference between the Intel bundles and the AMD bundles is Intel bundles come with G-Skill Ripjaws S5. The AMD bundles come with G-Skill Flare X5. And the only difference between Flare X5 and Ripjaws S5 is the Flare X comes with an Expo SPD profile, which is meant for Ryzen, but it will work with Intel. And likewise, the Ripjaws come only with an XMP profile, which will also work with an AMD Ryzen motherboard. They are both backwards compatible. So I personally have tested this. That's why I'm speaking with authority here. It will work. You can mix the RAMs. You can run Ripjaws with Ryzen's. You can run Flare X with Intels. It will work. The motherboards will load them. But this is the reason why Micro Center has that distinction, because Ripjaws have XMP profiles and Flare X5 has the Expo profiles. But they are effectively the exact same type of memory. Okay, so they've got the Core Ultra 9 for $700 with a Gigabyte Z890 Gaming X Wi-Fi. And for $100 more, you can step up to an MSI Z890 Mag Tomahawk Wi-Fi. All right, and then if you're someone similar to the AMD Zen 4, so aka the Ryzen 7000 series, they're also the 14th gen, the leftovers of the remnant 14th gen from 2023. So you've got your 14900K for $600. I do not recommend this over the Intel Core Ultra. If someone for whatever reason just has to buy Intel because I don't know whatever the reason is, if they have to go Intel because they love Intel with all their heart and soul, and they pledge their allegiance to the nation of Intel, and they refuse to buy AMD even though they want to play games or whatever. So if they have to go with Intel, I highly, highly recommend 100%, 150% recommend the Ultra 9 285K over the 1400K. Please, for the love of all things technology, do not buy a 14900K over an Intel Core Ultra 9 if you have to buy Intel because you love Intel with all your soul. Please, you are doing yourself a disservice by saving $100 and going with the ghetto 14900K versus the Ultra 9 285K. I am being 100% dead serious. This sounds like it's some kind of weird comic skit, but I am being 100% serious when I say the Core Ultra 9 285K is vastly superior to the terrible and defect-ridden, we'll say, Raptor Lake architecture from the past. So the Core Ultra 9 comes with a Z890 chipset. The Z890 chipset gives you standard built-in, courtesy of the Arrow Lake CPU, full Thunderbolt 4 capability. The Z890 chipset also includes an additional 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 5. As a result, there is no longer any mention of lane sharing woes if you want to run a Gen 5 SSD or just use the top SSD slot in the Z890 motherboard. All the Z790 motherboards share GPU lanes with the primary SSD slot. This is a limitation of Z790. So as soon as you put any SSD in the top slot of the Z790 board, doesn't matter what Z790 board it is, guess what? You're going to run your graphics card at X8 lanes. Yes, every Z790 motherboard has the dreaded GPU lane sharing, but the ironic thing is they share the lanes with an M.2 drive. Yes, an M.2 drive. The primary, the fastest, the best, the Gen 5 M.2 slot on every Z790 motherboard steals the lanes from the graphics card. So it forces the graphics card to run at 8 lanes all the time. I can't tell you how many people have been pinging me, asking me, showing me GPU-Z screenshots of their ghetto Z790 motherboard running their GPU, their RTX 4090 or whatever, at X8 lanes of Gen 4 speed. They're like, hey, help, help, help. Why is my GPU running at half lanes? Why is my GPU running at half lanes? Why is my GPU running at half lanes? What? Help, help. Z790, help, help. Why is it running at half lanes? Why is my 4090 running at half lanes? It's supposed to be a flagship motherboard. I spent like $3,000 on this build, or $4,000 on the build. Why is my GPU running at 8 lanes? Help, please help, please help. And then I look at them and I'm like, bro, you have a ghetto motherboard. Get out of my face. So let me move on. Okay, so this is the reason why. Please, for the love of all things technology, never ever think of buying the 14th gen in 2025. It is complete garbage compared to modern current generation Intel. So, Z890, no lane sharing compared to Z790. You also get Thunderbolt 4 as standard equipment. You do not get that on Z790. Some motherboards do allow that, but the vast majority of people who want Thunderbolt on Z790, oh, guess what they have to do? Guess what they have to do? They have to buy an add-in card. Yes, spend more money to add Thunderbolt manually to your ghetto Z790, because it's like nickel and dime. Oh, you want this feature? Buy this add-on. Oh, you want that thing? Sorry, it doesn't support it. Oh, you have lane sharing problems? Too bad. It's a functionality. Oh, it's a feature. It's not a bug. That's the answer of Z790. So, Z890 fixes all of those problems. The other thing that I will tell people, here's kind of another piece of advice as to why Intel Core Ultra is so much better than the 14th gen. Guess what? The integrated graphics of the Arrow Lake CPU. This Intel Core Ultra, the Intel Core Ultra, it's so ultra, it has AV1 encoding. AV1 encoding. AV1 encoding on the integrated graphics on an Arrow Lake Intel Core Ultra. You don't get AV1 encoding on the ghetto 14th gen. Oh, people probably don't care. But if you're thinking about it from a productivity standpoint, that's another check mark in favor of Core Ultra. Oh, Core Ultra has AV1 encoding. Oh, Core Ultra doesn't have stupid lane sharing between the M.2 and the GPU. Oh, Core Ultra, it uses less power. It's not going to melt the CPU and degrade the voltage problem like Raptor Lake, because Raptor Lake was made with Intel's Foundry. You know why that can't happen on Core Ultra? Because it was made from TSMC. Oh, it's made by the same company that makes the Ryzen CPUs. Oh, Ryzen and Intel Core Ultra are actually made by the same company. Who would have thought? Oh, it's going to be way more reliable now. So Intel and AMD are slowly fusing together into Vegito. That's basically what's happening. So anyway, if someone has to buy Intel, the only option today is the Intel Core Ultra. This is completely dead to me. I don't recommend this at all. This is a complete waste of money. Garbage tier. Ghetto. The 14700K is the most ghetto. $500 ghetto. I'd rather buy a Switch 2. This is some complete garbage. Okay, now we come to the more interesting stuff. So now we come to 12th gen. Oh, look, 12th gen. It's still here. I recognize 12th gen. The last time I saw 12th gen was when Endwalker came out back at the end of 2021. 12th gen launched at the tail end of the pandemic. Man, this thing's been around for a while. I recognize this thing. The last time I saw the 12700K was when we were living in a pandemic and toilet paper was out of stock at Costco. Man. And DDR5 was like $800 for 64 gigs of 5600. So, boy, has this stuff seen some... It's lived a long life. The 12th gen has been around. The 12th gen. And the funny thing is, oh, look, 12th gen is still around. 14th gen is somehow here. 12, 14, 12, 14. Something seems to be missing here. 12, 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 12, 14. So we have a i7 12700K and a i9 12900K and a 14. What? There's a missing number. There's a missing number. Where's the 13? Oh, I think I know what's going on here. I wonder why is 12th gen a CPU from 2021 here, brand new today, and there's 14. Where's 13? Who can tell me where the 13 is? There's 12 and there's 14. Where's 13? Does anybody know where it is? Sales closed, everyone knows that. Well, it's right there. It's actually still here. At least it's here in another form. See, it's like the 13th gen was Gandalf the Grey. And now it comes back at the turn of the tide as the 14th gen. The 14th gen is Gandalf the White. It's still around. It's still here in a different form. So the 13th gen is actually here. At least it is here in spirit, in the form of the 14th gen. So we have Golden Cove and we have Raptor Cove. Golden Cove was 12. Raptor Cove is 13, but it's also 14. They're exactly the same. So basically 13 and 12 are still around. The only difference is 13 is actually called 14. So, and then we've got Intel Core Ultra, which is the new stuff. So some are calling this 15th gen. 15th gen, which is politically incorrect, but I understand why they refer to it as 15th gen, because it came after the 14th gen. But the 14th gen is actually just the 13th gen, because there actually is no 14th gen. But anyway, that's if we're going off of the actual architectures. 13 was in the middle. You like that I used air cooling for the 13 Hurricane? It didn't degrade because of that. Yeah, I know, right? The more you know, the more you know. Okay, so no, I'm not going to take credit for that. I would have never guessed that Raptor Lake would have had the voltage problem, but I got lucky. I got lucky because I always favor air cooling. I don't care how much wattage the CPU uses. I mean, heck, my Threadripper is being cooled by air. Air is cooling my Threadripper. That's a 350 watt CPU, and it's air cooled. So 1300K is not getting a radiator anytime soon. That thing is gonna stay on air its entire life. For life. It's air cooled for life. So, because it will never die. It's being given an air cooler for its own good, to save it from death. All right. So the Intel bundles, we kind of like joked around this, but in all seriousness, I do think the best bundle here is definitely the Core Ultra 7 265K. For $500, you're getting the Core Ultra 7, the latest and greatest Intel CPU. You're still getting the 32 gigs of DDR5-8000, and you're getting an Asus, a white Z890 motherboard. It's interesting that the alternative motherboard choice is also a mostly white/silver colored motherboard. I would have thought they would have chosen like a black motherboard or something more neutral to be an alternative to the white motherboard that's as the stock configuration. But yeah, I think this is the best deal. I don't recommend the KF because it's like for $20 more, you better get that AV1 encoder integrated graphics. So yeah, the KF is stupid. Like that's a waste. And then the Core Ultra 9 at $700 the bundle. At $700, this is not a terrible choice. The main problem with the Core Ultra 9 is it doesn't really give you anything in terms of like better performance versus the Core Ultra 7. Like the one thing is Intel is well known for locking down features and making certain features exclusive to their higher end CPUs. So a good example of that is thermal velocity boost. Technically, the Core Ultra 9 is the 9 series CPU is the only one that is supposed to make use of thermal velocity boost. But I think some motherboard manufacturers don't follow the spec, or at least some of the BIOSes that I've seen out there allow a Core Ultra 7 to use at least some degree of thermal velocity boost, even though that's supposed to be exclusive to the Core Ultra 9. So that's one thing that sticks out. And then obviously the main difference is going to be the additional E-cores that you get with the Core Ultra 9. You get 4 more E-cores with the Core Ultra 9. So for whatever that's worth, like if you want the E-core multi-thread performance, you know, that would be, it's like, are 4 E-cores worth $200? For most people, the answer to that is probably no. So, that's why I think this one is the best deal. And what's weird is there's no Core Ultra 5 bundle, which is weird. It's like they're completely ignoring their entry level. There's no i5. I don't think there's any more Arrow Lake or Alder Lake. Alder Lake i5, I think, has been discontinued for a while. In fact, I think all of Alder Lake production is winding down. I think Mike would probably know, but I think Alder Lake is end of life, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not end of life, it's going to go end of life sometime this year, if not already. Because it's over the 3-year mark. It'll be 4 years old in November. So the 12th gen is middle-aged at this point. It's going on almost 4 years. That in CPU lifespan, that's considered already kind of up there in terms of the years. So the reason why it's still around and 13th is not around anymore, because 13 is basically 14. That's the main point I wanted to come across. I want people to understand that the reason why there's still 12 and there's no 13 is because 13 is still around. It's just called 14. It got rebranded. And 12 is just still there because it's always been 12. And I think 12th gen was very popular. 12th gen when it came out was significantly better than 11th gen, and it finally put Intel back in front of AMD in terms of the performance, because Zen 3, the Ryzen 5000 was dominating in everything, and 11th gen came out after Ryzen 5000, and it was terrible because it was in some cases it was slower than 10th gen, because some of them the upper like the i9 11900K couldn't scale beyond 8 cores, but the previous 10900K was 10 core. So it was like, what? And then the 12th gen came out because they panicked and had a double launch that year. And 12th gen was actually really good. So this was very competitive. It was faster than Zen 3. And then we know what happened the following year. AMD launched the 5800X 3D and retook the gaming crown, at least the gaming crown. And then for all those Star Citizen people out there, they all flocked to the 5800X 3D day one. And you didn't have to, you didn't even think about DDR5 back then, even though Alder Lake did support DDR5. It was so stupidly expensive. In fact, the funny thing about this, speaking of DDR5, the $300 Alder Lake 12700K bundle, this bundle comes with 16 gigs of bargain barrel DDR4. This bundle, $300 bundle, doesn't even come with DDR5. You're buying last generation DDR4 with a CPU from 2021. So that's why it's $300. But I don't think that $300 is really worth it. I would definitely not get 12900K. That's probably an even worse deal. Although that one at least has the DDR5. So that's why it always boils down to the Core Ultra 7 is really the only good deal. I mean, unless someone's just really, really desperate, then I guess I just can't recommend the Raptor Lake on principle because those Z790 boards are just trash. So yeah, it's got to be the Core Ultra 7, man. Like that's the only one for $500. That's the play. That's the play. If you got to buy Intel for whatever reason, because you are in your own little world and you live in the world of Intel or whatever, that's the play. $500, Core Ultra 7 with the Asus board, or $50 more for that MSI board. That's basically it. I mean, these other ones are kind of redundant. This is what I call the hardcore Intel fanboy build. This is the hardcore build. I mean, I'm saying that, dude, Core Ultra 9 right here. Right here. You're looking at it, this is the Intel fanboy build right here. So we got this thing paired up with none of these boards. No, we're using the most hardcore. We're using the Z890 Hero from Asus, the Maximus Hero. We literally did a video this week featuring the Maximus Hero with how to add Thunderbolt 5. Yes, next gen Thunderbolt 5. The next gen is now the current gen Thunderbolt 5 with the Intel Core Ultra 9 with that Maximus Hero. Oh yes, that's how it's done. Don't buy that Maximus Extreme. The Maximus Extreme is a scam. $1,000. It takes away Thunderbolt 4. It forces you to go to Thunderbolt 5 and have very few USB ports as a result. Meanwhile, you can spend less money, get Thunderbolt 4 on a Z790 Maximus Hero. And then if you truly want Thunderbolt 5, you can add Thunderbolt 5 and still also have Thunderbolt 4. So you have 4 Thunderbolt ports on your motherboard. That is the play, and that costs less. This add-in card plus the Hero costs less money than the Extreme. That is the big brain play if you truly want to go with Intel. So we did a video about that earlier this week. So if you're really interested in that, check out the video. So yeah, there's two bundles here worth looking at. There's the Everyman Intel build, and there's the hardcore Intel fanboy build bundle. These are kind of like trash bundles, and then yeah, this is like if you want to build a retro computer from like the pandemic, that's this one down here with DDR4. I'm just curious, like what is this actual speed? What is this DDR4? Okay, DDR4 3200, 16 gigs. So you get two 8 gig sticks, 16 gigs with a 2021 CPU and a DDR4 motherboard that doesn't have a proper cover for the IO shroud there. So, you know, $300. I'd rather get a Switch 2, to be honest, over this, but yeah. Yeah. Core Ultra 7, man, that's the way to go. If you're going Intel, this is the play. That's my recommendation. If you're an Intel fanboy, there's the play. But all this other stuff down here, Raptor Lake, Alder Lake, that's all noise. That's all noise. The AMD ones, I think there's like a lot more choices, including that Threadripper build down there. But in terms of what I recommend, if someone's going to build a gaming PC, probably this one. The 9700X bundle for $420. Like this is cheaper than that Intel bundle. But I will say the main difference, the Intel bundle comes with a much better motherboard. That Z890 Asus board is significantly better than this Gigabyte B650 board. So that's one of the things I've noticed. The one thing about this, they don't have a good alternative. You can replace the Gigabyte with another Gigabyte? A white one? I don't know. That's like, I don't know, man. That's not a lot of good choices there. But that's the price on that is actually quite good, though. And then they don't have any... Oh, yeah, they do. They've got El Cheapo. They've got the debug build, and then they've got the El Cheapo down here. So, okay. Alright, so that's pretty much it. What's weird, actually, is the best motherboard upgrade that's included on this bundle page is this one, the Asus X870E-E ROG Strix. But that brings this 9800X3D build, the bundle, up to almost, it's like over $900 at that point. So, I don't know, because this is like a $500 motherboard without a bundle. And then the CPU. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Is anybody planning on doing a build during the Independence Day weekend, for those of you in the US? Or did you already do a build recently? Pro WS, Sage... Wi-Fi #1 good. Yeah, that is good, but that's for the productivity people. This is not for the gamers down here. This is for professionals. This is for workstation use case, guys. Like, please do not buy this to build a gaming PC. You will be disappointed if you build this as a gaming PC. The amount of money spent on this for gaming is totally not worth it. Unless you plan on actually developing games with like Unreal Engine 5 and using a lot of virtualization instances for simulating, you know, multiplayer gaming environments, then this makes sense, but otherwise it's like, no. 9950X3D, what are we doing? Oh, someone's asking what air cooler... The Noctua D15. Chromax. Yeah, Mark got it. Seems like more that motherboard. Wait, that seems like more than that motherboard, and that this would be no. The motherboard. What is the CPU is what $400 something, and the motherboard is $500. So together they're already over $900, and we haven't even added the cost of the RAM. So it's basically free RAM, plus like $30 off probably. Yeah, the Strix-E is a $500 motherboard, for those wondering. This is the overclocker board. You know why? Because the Strix-E has the external E-clock. So you can do base clock overclocking for your 9800X3D with this motherboard. No, it comes with RAM. It's basically what this means is you get these three things, but if you want to swap out this default motherboard, like if you don't like the TUF, you want a better board, you can swap it out for one of these two. But then these become the price. So no, it does include the RAM. That's how it always is with the Micro Center bundle. They've been doing this. They started these bundles with the RAM in with the Zen 4 launch, back when Ryzen 7000 series launched back in 2022. And they never stopped. I'm surprised they've got this program with the free RAM going for so long. They've got some special contract agreement with G-Skill. They have to, because it's always G-Skill. Now, recently, I've seen them offer... I mean, it's not always G-Skill. Like, for example, for the Threadripper bundle, the memory that you're getting for free is the Kingston Fury Renegade Pro quad-channel kit. So you're getting 4 sticks of RDIMMs for free with this bundle. That's literally free, because that's $650 RAM right there for free. And then that's why that Threadripper bundle is actually quite good. They are offering the option to upgrade the RAM to Corsair RGB. So you don't have, like if you want RGB, you can go with Corsair Vengeance RGB for $30. So like $650, but if you pay $680, you get Corsair Vengeance RGB instead of this Flare X. Or for $125 more, you can get Corsair Vengeance RGB 64 gigabytes of RAM. So they are slowly starting to add more options to the bundle. That's what I've noticed. It started with these different motherboards, and now they're actually offering a different vendor's RAM. And then there's also this add a Samsung 9100 Pro 4 terabyte for $400. That is, I believe, yeah, that's a Gen 5 4 terabyte SSD for $400. That is a very, very high-end SSD. They're offering that because all of these motherboards have a Gen 5 SSD slot that doesn't share lanes with the graphics card. If we go to... Does the Intel one have that? Oh, the Intel one doesn't have that. They do have the Corsair option for the... Okay, they do have those for Raptor Lake. Okay, except for the 12700K. That one is stuck. That's forced to be on DDR4. Even though it's capable of running DDR5. At least the bundle forces you into DDR4. And then... they don't have that SSD option for Intel. Huh. So they've got some special deal. You can get a Samsung Gen 5 SSD, 4 terabyte Gen 5, a 9100 Pro for $400. That's expensive though. I mean, personally, to me, you're paying like $1 a gigabyte. I always try to aim for 50 cents a gigabyte. So for me, I would rather get like a Gen 4 SSD for as close to $200 as possible for 4 terabytes. That would be the play that I would aim for personally. But if someone wants the best of the best, you know, that's a fast Gen 5 SSD. That is also the Pro series Samsung, not the Evo series. So it has better endurance. You got the Crucial. Oh, that's a good deal. That's a pretty good deal. 4 terabyte Gen 5, the Crucial T7 for $300. Yeah. Yeah, we are using one of those, but I don't have the 4 terabyte. So I personally use this. The T700 2 terabyte. I don't have the 4 terabyte, but I've had this for a while now. So yeah, that's what's in this system. You don't like the Corsair kits as you need ICUE to control the RGB. I don't know if you have to use it to control the RGB. You're probably right, though, knowing it's part of the Corsair ecosystem. Yeah. You went with a 4 terabyte and 3 terabyte 990 Pro. Just got the newest Samsung. J5, you mean Gen 5 M.2? Not J5 M.2. What's this one, guys? What's this? Anyone know what this is? 990 Evo Plus. I got one of these here. We might do a video about it in the future. Kind of a sneak peek right there for the members. May do a video on the Samsung 990 Evo Plus 4 terabyte. 4 terabyte, 7,250 megabytes per second reads. This is a weird SSD. It is a Gen 4 X4, or it is a Gen 5 X2. So this one can operate at Gen 5, but only a 2-lane Gen 5 interface. It cannot use all 4 lanes of Gen 5. I don't understand how that works. It says it right here on the top. It literally says it right here. It literally says, it's kind of blurry on the camera, but it basically says PCIe 4.0 X4/5.0 X2. So what happens? I wonder what this means. Like if I plug this into a Gen 5 slot on the Godlike or the Hero, what will actually happen? I don't know, man. This is weird. It's a Gen 5 X2 or a Gen 4 X4. So I just picked this up from Micro Center today. So we might do a video about this just to verify the read speeds. I might play around with a Gen 5 slot on the motherboard, then see what happens. But yeah, that might be future content on this channel. I'm starting to run out of space because of all the Steam games that we've had to live stream recently. So I'm capped on my actual physical SSD slots, so I need to take my 1 terabyte SSD out. I'm probably going to put that into my Z890 Maximus Hero, and then I'm going to put this in the Godlike to replace that Crucial P1, the Crucial P1 1 terabyte that I've had forever. I'm probably going to put that in my Z890 Maximus with the flagship Intel Core Ultra 9 285K. You found out the hard way that a PCIe 4.0 X4 in a 5.2 X... What's a 5.0 X2 slot, though? What sort of device has two... Is that a laptop? Does the laptop run at Gen 5 X2? Like, what has Gen 5 X2? Is there a motherboard that does that? It's limited by the lanes? Oh, you're saying... Okay, well, yeah, it's going to be... But what does it mean, though? Like... Why would it say 4.0 X4/5.0 X2? 5.0 X2 is equal to 4.0 X4. You can disable the USB4 ports, it will run at X4? Are you talking about the Godlike or the Tomahawk? The only motherboards that I know of that do that are the MSI X870 Tomahawk or the X870E Godlike. Those have the option to do that. I don't know of any other motherboard that lets you do that. The Carbon and the Edge do it? Wait, what? There are motherboards that I have not known about? The Carbon? I thought we already looked at this and determined that it doesn't do that. This motherboard supports 1DPC 1R at up to 8400. Oh. PCIe 1 and E2 and M.2 share the bandwidth. But why would this... Hold on. This doesn't need to share the bandwidth because... Or no, this doesn't need to disable any lanes for full bandwidth. Because 8 lanes go to this, 4 lanes go to this, and the 4 remaining lanes go to this. 8 plus 4 plus 4 equals 16, and the total is 16 lanes. So why would it need to share? Carbon shares bandwidth? Why does it share the bandwidth? I mean, no. I mean, what I mean to say is... Oh, it says it shares the bandwidth. It's not sharing the lanes, it's sharing the bandwidth. Oh, there's a difference there. And this might explain why MSI's had a lot of, we'll say, shortcomings with the way their current generation motherboards have been disappointing me. Oh, it's sharing bandwidth. It's not actually sharing lanes. That means there's a difference. That means that all 16 lanes are made available to all 3 of these interfaces via the split. Versus when you have lane sharing, you have a switch. The difference between this and what we've always focused on last year with motherboards with lane sharing, the difference is when you have lane sharing, you have a switch. The switch will disable. It'll basically route the tunnel signaling. Here, we gotta go into paint now. Now I gotta get rid of all the war of the CPUs, clear all this stuff up. Okay. There's a difference between GPU. There's a difference between PCIe. So PCIe lane sharing means that you have something called a switch. So let's say we have 24, let's say we have PCIe 5.0 x 24. So we have a total of 24 lanes. If we're doing what's called lane sharing, that means that there is a switch, there's a circuit inside this box. Let's say someone plugs in a graphics card. Let's say someone plugs in a Gen 5 GPU, an RTX 5090, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's say someone plugs in a GPU. Doesn't matter what the GPU is. Or, okay, Gen 5 GPU. Someone plugs in a Gen 5 GPU that can scale up to all 16 lanes. It will negotiate. It'll be like detecting. Oh, GPU is installed. Check the voltage on all the pins. Oh, all of them activate. All of them respond. That means that this has an X16 width. That means I will give you 16 lanes. Over here, there's an M.2 drive. Samsung 990 Evo Plus. Someone plugs one of these in over here into the M.2 slot. It detects, oh, you are Gen 5. I will give you 2 lanes because you, for some reason, say that you're 5.0 X2. And then now, so you're at 18 out of 24 lanes. So you still have a lot of lanes. So now someone plugs in an ASM 4242 chipset. Let's say MSI solders an ASM 4242 chipset on here. They literally take one of these, this USB4 thing that we did a video about last year for Threadripper. They take this ASM 4242. Go watch the video from earlier this week if you want to see that in detail. The MSI manufacturer literally soldered this on. You can't physically remove this. And the switch is like, oh, this is here. Detecting 4 lanes. I will give you 4 of the lanes. Even though you are only a Gen 4 device, I will take 4 of the lanes and give them to you. So now we're at, what is that, 22 out of... This is 22 out of 24. There's only 2 lanes left. So those 2 lanes technically... Well, they technically go... I should not have put X4 here, or X2, this is dumb. Just to make this easy to understand, it's going to say X4 here. It's going to say X4 here. So you've got 4 here, you got 4 here, you got 4 here. So 16 plus 8. Oh, look. 24 lanes. All of them are using all the lanes. There's no more lanes. There's no more lanes. So if we're doing lane sharing, so actually I should not have said MSI because MSI is not doing lane sharing. We're saying, just say this is Gigabyte or Asus or somebody. It's one of the other 3. Now, somebody goes and plugs in. So the user goes and installs an M.2, whatever. Just say they install another M.2. Is going to look at it, and it's like, oh, look. You are requesting 4 lanes. Now, in here, there is actually a switch. There's a switch that connects, that controls the PCIe lane allocation between these components. This is fixed. This is fixed. They cannot be switched off. It will never take lanes from this. It will never take lanes from this. So it has to take lanes from the graphics card to enable this. So now this, actually let's do a different color. So now this is running X4. The new one is running at X8. You cannot run at X12 because of how PCIe works. It has to cut in half. You cannot cut in thirds. So it's going to cut this in half. And then that allows someone can install another M.2 and get 4 more lanes. So now you're sharing these 16 lanes across 3 devices. This is PCIe lane sharing. There is a switch component that will detect if there is something present, and if it does, it will basically switch the lanes allocated. This is different from what MSI is doing, which is bandwidth sharing. Bandwidth sharing means that there is actually no switch. It is basically a dynamic hub-like device, which has some sort of flow control mechanism so that it's not like a pure hub where it's chaotic and the traffic is going back and forth and the GPU can interrupt the M.2, and it's not like that. But what it does is it will basically subdivide the bandwidth, and that's the key word. The bandwidth is getting divided rather than the lanes getting switched based off of devices being plugged in. So now let's do lane or bandwidth sharing. So PCIe bandwidth sharing is different. It's actually an easier, well, I don't think it's an easier thing. It's probably a more complicated thing, to be honest, and that's why no one's doing it besides MSI. So the GPU is plugged in, the M.2 is plugged in, the ASM is plugged in. Now, it depends on how the hub device is set up to divide the bandwidth, essentially, because if you have a GPU, with 16, you have a, let's say you have ASM 4242, aka USB4. That's what that is. That's there. That's always there. And then you get, because everybody needs their Thunderbolt. And then you plug in an M.2. So with bandwidth sharing, there is no like, oh, I'm going to turn off these lanes and give these guys lane. No. It's like, okay, we're going to do flow control. GPU traffic is in red because it's a Radeon card plugged in. So you got Radeon bandwidth going here, but you also might have Samsung Evo whatever bandwidth flowing this way. And then we have USB4 Thunderbolt flowing this way. So basically the traffic, the PCIe digital traffic signaling is basically sharing the bus lanes. They're literally sharing the 16 lanes dynamically in real time. That is the difference between bandwidth sharing and lane sharing, meaning there is no switch in this system that's like, oh, you plugged in this guy. I'm going to take some lanes away and give you lanes so that you can run your M.2. No, it's going to dynamically run those. Now, we all know that there's a total of 24 lanes here. This is still PCIe 5.0 x24. So the question is, well, what about the rest of the stuff? If the hub is dividing or sharing the bandwidth between these two, I mean, okay, let's say the GPU probably isn't even shared. The GPU is probably on its own bus. So I probably shouldn't have drawn the red lines, but this is separate. This is bypassing this. This hub is sharing the bandwidth between the USB4 and that M.2 drive. That's what's happening. Think of it like the difference is a switch versus a splitter. That is the easiest way to describe these different things. Look at the edge block diagram. USB4 sharing. The GPU and 3 of M.2 aren't shared. It apparently only shares between... Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. So this red stuff is not here. Ignore the red. The GPU is bypassing this. It has its own bus. These guys are sharing, but the GPU is not sharing. Which means the GPU has its 16 lanes, but you know what? These two together are sharing 4 lanes. Those guys are sharing 4 lanes. And you're probably wondering, okay, where's the last 4 lanes? Because remember, there's always 24 lanes. 16 go to the GPU, 4 go... Well, actually, hold on. That's not what that motherboard... Oh, you're talking about a different motherboard, though. I'm talking about the Carbon. The Carbon... No, the Carbon is sharing. The Carbon is sharing the lanes. So the 16 lanes are shared. Because, I mean, it says it right there on the product page. So I was correct. It says it right here. PCIe 1. That's the GPU one. And the second one. Oh, it's a second one. Okay, okay. So they're not... So the USB4 is not sharing. Okay, so for the Carbon... For the Carbon, it's different then. I mean, it's still the same concept, though. So let's get rid of... Let's clean this up a bit. Let's get rid of all of this. So let's get rid of the USB4. So in this one, the difference is, so you still have 3 devices shared. You have, what do they call it? PCIe E1. You have E2, and you have, what is it? M.2_2 or something. You have this, and you have this. You have these 3 things. That's basically what it is. So the GPU... Oh, I forgot PCIe, whatever. Okay, so... You have the GPU. GPU traffic is going. Second graphics card, or AverMedia Live Gamer 4K 60 capture card traffic is going. And then Samsung Evo SSD or whatever is going. You basically are sharing the bandwidth across these three devices. So I've got in here, I have a 9070 XT. And then over here, I have a Live Gamer 4K in the middle. And then on the right, I have the Evo, the 990 Evo Plus. All three of these will share the bandwidth. They're one big happy family, sharing 16 lanes. So they operate in a 16-lane domain. 16-lane domain. Sharing the bandwidth. Sharing the bandwidth. That is bandwidth sharing. It's always 16 lanes available to these. Now we know this can go up to 16. This can go up to 4 lanes. This can go up to 4 lanes. But this SSD only needs 2 lanes of Gen 5. So if you're providing it Gen 5 bandwidth, which in this case it is, or I think it's supposed to. Let me look at the thing. Yes, it's Gen 5. All of it's Gen 5. So it's all Gen 5. So it's full, pure Gen 5 bandwidth. This is still PCIe 5.0 x 24 available lane count bandwidth. So that's the 16. The remaining lanes go to places that we already know. One of them is ASM 4242 for USB4 on the back for Thunderbolt. Everyone needs it. That is required, mandatory. And then we have the primary M.2. The primary M.2. These guys have their own dedicated switched lanes. And there you have it, the total 24. It comes out, it all makes sense. This is what the MSI, what is this motherboard? The X870 Carbon Wi-Fi does this. This is the X870E Crosshair Hero. This is the X870E Carbon Wi-Fi. Just to give people an idea of the differences of the approach. Meaning there is a switch. There is a switch here. The switch is controlling the 4 lanes to this guy, the 4 lanes to this guy, and the 16 lanes to all these things. So these guys are essentially on a hub. Does that make sense? Look at the edge block diagram. Hold on. What is it? X870 Ti? Is it Edge Ti? Oh, the white one? This one? It's okay. So this one. The Edge Ti Wi-Fi. Oh boy, this one's got a lot of complicated stuff right here. There's a paragraph. There's a wall of text. That's always fun to figure out what that actually means. To interpret this. Okay, M.2_2 will be unavailable when you... Okay, whatever, that doesn't mean anything. USB4 on the back. This is basically... We'll translate this. ASM 4242 and the second M.2 share the bandwidth. Okay, we've already looked at bandwidth sharing. Both run at PCIe X2 when a device is installed in the M.2 slot. You can switch the M.2 to PCIe, so... Okay, that means that... Oh, man, I don't like their use of the word bandwidth here, because they're actually... This actually sort of implies, because it says this, it kind of implies that it's using a switch, like what Asus is doing. And it basically means that when it detects this is enabled, it will allocate 2 lanes from the ASM4242 to this SSD. So this one's using a switch. There are junctions. Yeah. But it's a switch. It's going to like divide the bandwidth. You can switch the M.2_2 to the X4 in the BIOS, but this will disable the ASM. Okay, so yeah, you basically have a lever. The default is half and half. Let's look at the block diagram. Set page 73. Okay. Why is it so low res? Anyway, right here. So there's a switch here, and the default is 2 to this. No, the default is actually 4 to ASM. The default is ASM 4242 gets all 4 lanes. That's the primary path. The second that someone installs an SSD in here, it will fall to the second option, which is 2 lanes to ASM, 2 lanes to the SSD. And then if the user wants to flip all 4 lanes to the second path, that'll take away all the lanes, the remaining lanes from the ASM, and give all the lanes to the SSD. So, but then you lose your 40 gigabit USB4, and I don't think anyone wants to do that. Unless they plan on never using those, but those are like very, very useful. I'm serious, guys. The USB4 ports are far more valuable than that SSD on the motherboard. We're going to be doing some videos about this topic in the future to prove that the USB4 is a big deal. It is a big, big deal in terms of what it allows the motherboard to do with stuff outside the PC. But more on that later. So the reason why MSI is favoring the bandwidth, the primary is ASM 4242, is because that is way more important than the SSD. That's why. But the BIOS is designed so that if a novice user who doesn't understand like the purpose of ASM 4242 and they don't know the difference, they just plug their Windows SSD, their boot drive, into this M.2_2, not knowing that this one's the one that has the sharing, well, at least it will default to give them 2 lanes so it can actually get up and running. But they're going to be scratching their head wondering, like, why is it running at half speed? Well, it opens the door to run a lot of external peripherals. I don't want to spoil my videos that are coming up, so we'll leave it at that. But I'll just tell you that it means that you have way more options than what you can. Let's just put it another way. You can do things with USB4. You can run peripherals off of USB4 that you can't run on regular USB-C. And we'll just leave it at that. So your M.2 Gen 5 2 would work well in this case. Your M.2 Gen... I think so, yes. I think so, because it's Gen 5. Yes. Yeah, that's a good observation, because it means if I plug this 990 Evo into this slot, it's going to come down to how the firmware on this SSD is designed from Samsung, because it implies that it can operate at Gen 5 2 lanes if the motherboard can supply 2 lanes of Gen 5. And it looks like the MSI MPG X870 Edge Wi-Fi will supply 2 lanes of Gen 5 bandwidth when an SSD is installed in this slot. Now, I don't know why it says X4. Oh, it can go up to X4. That's right, because it is doing the sharing. That's why. So yeah, in this use case, this is kind of a niche use case, but it's interesting because it's almost like the 990 Evo Plus is the perfect SSD for this motherboard's M.2_2 slot, because you're still going to be able to get the full 7,250 megabytes per second speed. You can basically still max out this SSD with only those 2 Gen 5 lanes. So pretty interesting. But this is they say bandwidth sharing. I don't think it's bandwidth sharing. This is more of like a, well, maybe it is a form of bandwidth sharing because it's dividing on the junction. I just don't understand what it does to flow control. There's got to be something for flow control here so that the ASM and the Gen 5 drive don't like interrupt each other when they're sending data or they're taking read requests from the CPU. You know what I'm saying? So there's something in there that controls the flow of the data from the CPU block to those two components there. Interesting. I have a feeling that we're going to see more of these type of SSDs show up in the future. These 4-lane Gen 4, but 2-lane Gen 5. The nice thing about 2-lane Gen 5 is that it's equal to 4-lane Gen 4, but it doesn't require the insane cooling that a full 4-lane Gen 5, like this T700, for example, or that Samsung 9100 requires. Because those use a lot more electricity because they run very fast. The T700 in particular, 12,400 megabytes per second. And some of the top end Gen 5s are going to be around 14,000 in terms of the read speed. Double the speed of this Evo 990. All right, well, that was an interesting discussion. I think that covers that. Let me see. We've been live for almost 2.5 hours. I talked about the tech deals. I talked about... we didn't really talk about GPU news. We talked about Thunderbolt 5, USB4. Did we talk about Thunderbolt 5, USB4? Oh, Thunderbolt 5. Just real quick, Thunderbolt 5 uses... This is the thing I don't understand about Thunderbolt 5. Thunderbolt 5 apparently can do up to 120 gigabytes of bandwidth. 120 gigabytes of bandwidth. But I don't understand how it does this, because it only uses 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 4. 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 4 is... The only way you can do that is if you can somehow... The only way they could possibly do this is some kind of like PAM3, PAM4 signaling encoding or something to somehow get the bit rate to be able to get this much speed. I don't know, I have to look into this more, but I just found that kind of interesting because in the reality, Thunderbolt 5 is supposed to be 80 gigabit. So this 120 gigabyte thing is some kind of magic thing that they're doing. No, I know it's gigabit. We're not talking about gigabytes. Gigabit per second, 120 gigabit per second. So that would be, let's do the math. 120 gigabit. There's 8 bits per byte. So you divide this by 8. Did I do that correctly? So that's 15. 15 gigabytes per second. 15 gigabytes per second. 15 gigabytes per second. Hold on. Did they talk about this? Where's the thing? Like somewhere, Tech Power Up did a really good article on... No, this is not what I'm looking for. Somewhere in here, they did something. Express scaling. Is it the older article? Okay, here we go. Yeah. This is good. Okay. So, 4 lanes of Gen 4 is equal to 8 lanes of Gen 3. That means 8 gigabytes per second. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, okay. Wait. So, okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it. So that's basically maxing out. Okay. So the Thunderbolt 5 spec is maxing out the full 4 lanes of the Gen 4 bandwidth. And basically it means that they're taking the bi-directional and they're doing unidirectional 120 gigabit. I think that's what they're doing. That's the only way that would actually work, because that's like a one-way trip. If you want to max the lanes, you got to go unidirectional if you're going to get that speed. So it's like they're doing like a full read or write at 120 gigabit. But it means that they're pushing in one direction and then it has to stop and then go back the other way, versus like bi-directional throughput, which would be what they're rating for like the 40 gigabit, 80 gigabit numbers that they advertise for Thunderbolt 4 and for USB4. So that's how they're doing it. Okay, so that makes sense. So Thunderbolt 5, we did a video about this on the channel. Currently, the only platform that supports Thunderbolt 5 is, you guessed it, Intel's Arrow Lake, the Intel Core Ultra with the Z890 motherboards are the only option today for Thunderbolt 5. So you cannot use this, because I saw the first thing that happened when I uploaded that video was I immediately saw comments of people asking, does this work with X870? Does this work with X870E? Can I install this in an AMD motherboard? Does this work with AMD? The answer is today, no, it does not work with AMD motherboards. It has to be on an Intel-based Arrow Lake. So it not only does it not work with AMD motherboards, it does not work with 14th gen and older Intel Z790 motherboards, at least not for the foreseeable future. Now, I think if those motherboards, if those older Raptor Lake and Alder Lake motherboards have a PCIe 4.0 X4 slot, and they also have the Thunderbolt header for ASUS, which means it has to be an ASUS motherboard, unless, eventually, I assume Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock will also start selling Thunderbolt 5 add-in cards as well. If those motherboards have this, potentially they could add support, but I don't know if they'll bother. It's always one of those things. What I've seen actually happen is ASUS USB4 PCIe. What I've actually seen happen is this card, which we did a video on last year, because if you guys remember, last year I was adamant about having USB 4 capability on all of my desktop computers. So the only computer that was left out, because all X870 and X870E motherboards feature USB 4. This card is physically nothing more than the ASM 4242 from ASMedia in an external enclosure card for a PCIe X4 interface. So this Gen 4 X4 with 40 gigabit bi-directional or 80 gigabit unidirectional bandwidth. So the only computer that didn't have access to USB 4, aka Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3, was my Threadripper computer. So I had to get this for Threadripper, and luckily Threadripper just so happens to have so many PCIe slots, so it was very easy to install this card, and we did a whole video about it last year on the channel about how to add USB 4/Thunderbolt to a WS-TRX50 Sage Threadripper motherboard. So basically that motherboard, this motherboard here, this motherboard right here, in that $3,000 Micro Center bundle, this is the one that I'm using for my Threadripper build. I added USB 4 via the ASUS add-in card, so I can plug in all my Thunderbolt peripherals into my Threadripper system, and they all work perfectly fine, and I can daisy chain up to like 4 devices plus a monitor and all that stuff. So yeah, it's great. So the nice thing about what ASUS has been doing Asus has been adding support for the USB4 card to a lot of motherboards, as long as those motherboards, and usually what I've seen is it's older Intel Z790 motherboards. So if you're someone who is on 13th gen, 14th gen, and you really want the 40 gigabit capability, there's a good chance if you have an Asus board, you could potentially get it via this add-in card. But the Thunderbolt 4 is probably a safer bet. So you could also get the older Thunderbolt 4 card from Asus. But Thunderbolt 5 is pretty much going to be restricted to Arrow Lake. In fact, we can look at it right now. They'll show you what it actually works with on their support site. So we go to manual and document compatibility. And then we look at the compatible cards for Thunderbolt 5. All right, currently, these are the cards that will work with the Thunderbolt 5. So here is the option from Asus. If you want to experience Thunderbolt 5 via Asus, you must have an Asus motherboard, and it must be one of these motherboards. So here are the motherboards. The Z890 Apex, the Z890 Hero. This is personally the motherboard featured in the video that we did this mod to, I guess. All right, Maximus Z890 Hero BTF. Okay, so a BTF board supports it. Pro, that's kind of weird because it's going to have to plug in on the front and you'll have all the cables hanging off the front of this, so that's kind of hilarious. Pro WS Z890 Ace dash or Z890 Ace SE. So this is the data center board for Arrow Lake, and then Pro Strix Z890-E gaming Wi-Fi. So they've got a lot of Strix boards. The -E, the -F, the -A, the Wi-Fi S, whatever the S is, the -H gaming. So all the Strix boards get support for Thunderbolt 5, so that's really nice. The tough boards, the Pro and the Plus, the Z890, I've never heard of this, but apparently there's the Z890 AYW gaming Wi-Fi, the Max gaming Wi-Fi 7, the Primes, and the Pro WS Ace SE. That's listed twice, apparently. Someone needs... Oh, no, this is the 880. Okay, this is... Oh, this is the workstation, not this. I don't... Okay. W880 Ace. Okay. And then there's some other ones. The lower end bargain stuff. The B68... The B860s. There's some B860s that can add Thunderbolt 5. So that's pretty cool. So these are the only motherboards. So as you can see from this list... Only Arrow Lake. So if you want to experience Thunderbolt 5, you have to be on Intel's Arrow Lake. And I believe, now this is going to be kind of conspiracy theory here. This is the tinfoil hat piece of the stream. The Intel wants to entice their buyers to upgrade to Arrow Lake and forget about 14th gen if they're on an older Intel platform. And one way to make them consider skipping 14th gen altogether, besides all the various reasons that we've mentioned previously, is to make Thunderbolt 5 exclusive to Arrow Lake artificially. Even if the Z790 boards have physical PCIe 4.0 X4 slots, deny them that by locking down the BIOSes. Intel has done this for years, going especially true on their HEDT platforms, where you were literally locked out of PCIe lanes on the board depending on what CPU you had. The fact that Intel also locks overclocking down to specific chipsets, in this case Z890, you can't overclock on B860 at all. It's banned. So like they have a history of this sort of behavior. So I'm pretty sure we will not see Raptor Lake getting Thunderbolt 5 support. It's kind of unfortunate, but it's the reality that we live in. So just like they don't want AMD to have easy access to Thunderbolt 5, they're definitely not going to allow their older CPUs to have access to Thunderbolt 5 to entice people to spend more money and upgrade to Arrow Lake. That is another way to help push and incentivize sales of the Arrow Lake platform. And how else to do it? Thunderbolt 5 and AV1 encoding. That's what I'm talking about. So, okay, so that is Arrow Lake's strengths. That's the strongest argument in favor of Arrow Lake that I've been able to come up with. But the nice thing is, on the flip side, the ASUS has been adding more support for older motherboards to feature the USB4 card. So even if you can't get access to Thunderbolt 5 because you don't have Arrow Lake, you can get access to USB4, which is the next best thing. So this is kind of like the open standard equivalent to Thunderbolt. So more on this in the future. Okay. So that's the Thunderbolt section of the live stream. GPU news. What did I want to talk about that? Oh, China. I wanted to mention briefly. China's domestic GPU manufacturers are swiftly making moves in the market, now advancing toward multi-billion-dollar IPOs. So there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of government money from within China that's helping fund these startup companies in China. And this is going to be something that we will see build out over the next several years. The Chinese market, if there's anyone that can put Nvidia in its place, it's going to be, well, if AMD can't do it, because AMD's tried to do it, every couple of generations, AMD can muster up a powerful GPU like the 6900 XT that can go toe-to-toe with Nvidia's best. So we'll see what happens at the end of next year. But in reality, I think if there's one unstoppable force that can eventually make a big dent, we'll say, in Nvidia's market dominance, it's probably going to come from something besides AMD. I just don't feel like I just don't see AMD getting enough momentum in the GPU world. It's going to take them at least like 5 more years to get ROCm and the AI software ecosystem to become truly on par with Nvidia. And it's not like Nvidia's sitting on their laurels doing nothing. So that's like a constant rat race that is not really going to become a race to the bottom anytime soon, because Nvidia is so far ahead in the software space that AMD, it's just a massive, massive uphill battle. But China has a lot of these new, smaller companies that are very hungry for business and are very capable. And the fact that there are all these, the trade embargoes or whatever, where you can't like sell certain, like Nvidia is kind of banned, and I think AMD is also banned from selling certain AI GPU accelerator SKUs to the Chinese market, and that's putting a speed limiter on the AI market development in the Chinese market. The only thing that's going to do, that is going to incentivize China, the Chinese market, to build up its own GPU hardware ecosystem, which is what More Threads has been doing. That's what this is a picture of right here, as well as build up the software ecosystem stack. Now, that software ecosystem stack is not easy to build. That took Nvidia like 2 decades to get to where it is now. So that you're talking 20 years worth of software development effort to build up CUDA to the behemoth that it is today. That's not something easy. That is a tall order to try to surpass. And AMD's been trying to do that for at least 10 years. And look at where they are. They're still trailing way behind. So we'll see what happens with the Chinese market. I think it's going to be interesting, because if there's one thing the GPU market needs balance. It's like, I think of it like, to use a Star Wars analogy, we need to bring balance to the Force. It's so skewed one way right now in favor of Nvidia that I think we need something that's external that needs to come in and tip the scales and rebalance it out. And I don't know if AMD has shown that they have potential, but they have not been capable of doing that. The closest they got was a 6900 RDNA 2 versus Ampere. So like Radeon 6000 versus RTX 30 series was the closest AMD got in a long time. And then things just kind of like slipped back into the norm where Nvidia's like ahead and AMD, AMD doesn't have anything that can compete with the 4090, for example. Today, AMD doesn't have anything that can compete with the 5090. So that's just how it's been for like 2 generations now. And we'll see what happens next year, because next year is going to be the showdown. It's going to be the return of the Radeon. And I think it's going to be a big splash. But I think the real deal is going to come from the Chinese market. But this is more of a long-term play that we'll see grow over time. But I just wanted to make the viewers of the stream aware, if they weren't aware, that the Chinese market has a lot of incentive to develop alternative hardware and software ecosystems to the Nvidia standard. And I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to mention on this stream. That was the GPU news part. Let me see, was there anything else? I guess in gaming news, Death Stranding 2 has sold 1.4 million units. Wait, in June? Oh, that was last month. So that was only like, that game came out a week ago. So that was like, what, 5 days? In 5 days, it sold 1.4 million units, and it's a PlayStation 5 exclusive. That's pretty good for a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Imagine if this was multi-platform day one, though. Like, this probably would have sold a ton. Although this game is not for everyone, I think this game is still a very, very good game, and I highly, highly recommend this game. We will be live streaming more of this weekend, just FYI. In other gaming news, Where Winds Meet will host its final PC and PS5 test on July 24th through the 31st. So if you're planning on playing this game and you want to test drive the game ahead of release, you probably want to sign up for this on their website. So check out the link on the WCCF Tech article here. The system requirements for this game, Where Winds Meet, the minimum requirements is a Intel 4th Gen Haswell i7 4770K or a Ryzen 5 Zen Plus 2400G. These are very low-end CPUs. These are ancient CPUs. They're not good, but they're the minimum, which means this game is probably not hard to run. The system RAM, 8 gigs of RAM, GTX 750 Ti, which is what, like a Nintendo Switch 1, an RX 550, or an Intel Arc A380. So very, very low-end spec game. These GPUs are all under $200. They're like $100 something GPUs, or even less if you're buying used from this stuff. So they recommend SSD though. So recommended 10th gen Intel Core i7 from the pandemic, or the 2019 Ryzen 7 Zen 2 based 3700X, 32 gigs of system RAM, RTX 2070 Super, or a 6700 XT, or an Arc A750. These GPUs are all over the place. I have no idea why they chose a 2019 NVIDIA GPU, a 2021 AMD GPU, and a 2022 Intel GPU. None of them are of the same generation. It's just super random. And this is what they're saying is recommended. We recommend, okay, so the game doesn't look like it's that hard to run, although they didn't say what resolution this is. I assume this is 1080p for all intents and purposes, but they're saying that it is a game with some MMO style features. Build or join a guild to unlock a wide range of group activities, from intense guild wars to challenging multiplayer dungeons and epic raids. Prove your might in competitive duels, or step into a shared, ever-evolving world with thousands of fellow adventurers. Okay, so it's like an MMO? Okay, I may look into it. I mean, it's free to test, to do the region test. So I might actually test this one out and see how it plays if I can get in on the PC. I mean, I'll probably sign up for both so we can do a side-by-side comparison like we did for Monster Hunter last year and earlier this year. But that basically covers that. So any other tech-related questions before we end the stream here? I think Steven said he had a question before the end, or someone said they had a question before the end of the stream. AMD and Nvidia are both limited by their developer base. End of story. Yes, that's true. Here, okay, desktop. When you say in comment string GPU today will be posted tomorrow, what's the comment string? I don't know what you mean by the comment string. Where is this? Were you referring to what exactly? Samsung is actually the cheapest of the three. What are we talking about? I have no idea. People are talking about there's some sidebar conversation about, I'm guessing, M.2 drives. The appearance of the godlike, what to do. Well, so what was the question? Is the question what motherboard? Again, that always is about use case. What are you going to do with your computer? When someone always asks me what motherboard should I get, I'm not going to, that's like, dude, that's like asking me what car should I get? What car should I buy? I don't know the price point. I don't know, like, do you need a Roadster? Like a Ferrari? Are we talking Ferrari here? Like, what are we talking about? Like, like when someone asks me what motherboard should I get, I keep thinking that, like, what car should I get? Like, that is the most open-ended, random question. If I don't know the use case and if I don't know the price point, like, how am I gonna? I can't answer that. Am I supposed to just default to some random motherboard? Okay, if you want to hear my default answer without knowing any of the requirements, that would be like me telling someone go get a Toyota Corolla, or a Toyota Camry. It's like the default random answer. Like that's just default. Okay, the default motherboard, ASRock Nova, X870 Phantom Gaming Nova from ASRock. That's the default answer without knowing anything. That's still the best value motherboard that I have seen. What is it? The question was, should he buy a godlike since it's on sale? And he wants a future-proof build. If you're going to use the stuff that the godlike comes with, then yeah. But if not, then no. Because you can save a lot more money and buy other computer parts with the savings. But see, here's the thing. If you're considering the godlike, I hope you're aware of the things that the godlike has to justify why you're considering it. Otherwise, why would you consider it? You see what I'm saying? Like, the fact that you're thinking of getting the godlike, that implies that you can afford to buy the godlike at the sale price of $999. Now, the follow-up question then is, do you need those features? Are you actually going to use them? And if not, what would you like? Okay, if you're not going to use them, then maybe you don't need that motherboard. So then what's the alternative choice? And then what would you then be able to use that other money for? Because if it's all going to a computer build, I assume that the money is going to a computer build in general. So if you don't buy the godlike, you're still going to spend the money on some other part of the computer. Whether that's additional SSD drives or more money toward a graphics card or whatever. Volta to Blackwell. I don't, wait, what? You have any SKU? Wait, what is the question here? GPU today, Ampere data center accelerator returns to secondary market 330% in the last 60 days. I don't understand the context of what we're talking about. Like, is there two or more different conversations going? Like, what's this stuff about GPU SKU data? 9070 XT. That's my default. That's my default answer. I'm gonna start developing default answers to these open-ended questions. Name one SKU. 9070 XT. The RX 9070 XT. Okay, that's the default answer. Default motherboard, X870 ASRock Nova Phantom Gaming. It's like default CPU, 9070X. 9070 XT. Oh, 9700X Ryzen 7 non-X3D. Default CPU for the gamers. Because if you live near a Micro Center, you can save like $200 by not buying the X3D variant. And then you can just throw that other $200 into another SSD. Like you could buy a 4 terabyte SSD or whatever. I guess I'm gonna have to get. I don't know, man, because I don't know how much of an influencer I am, but I have to be careful with influencing, like just blanket statement, like, oh, default this, default that. You know, like I don't like using default responses because all this stuff is so nuanced. Just it's like. Well, I mean, objectively speaking, 9070 XT is the best value GPU. So that's why that's going to become the default GPU. If someone asks me, what GPU should I get for 1440p? 1440p OLED, what should I get? Okay, the answer is 9070 XT. That's pretty easy, actually, to come to that conclusion. That's a fairly easy one to come up with. But the motherboard question is very open-ended. Very open-ended. That's like asking me, what car should I buy? Because, see, the thing is, the motherboard has so many things. Like, the graphics card, it's literally like, they're all basically, like, if you're looking at the 9070 XT, they're all basically the same chip. So it's like, well, which one do you like the RGB? Which cooler do you like? Which brand do you like? It's very easy. It's like, it's not like one GPU is going to have additional, like, you know, this one has this PC. Motherboards have different PCIe layouts. Motherboards have different, like, M.2 heat sinks. Motherboards have different things about them, even though it's the same chipset. You're looking at 8K for the TV. Wait, what? Why is there what is this stuff about the graphics card? I thought we were talking about the motherboard. Now we're talking about graphics cards. 9070 XT increases 37% since week ending 4. You mean April 26th? And that is a constant ramp in supply, so I cannot see the sales in that unless they go down in real-time auditing. Okay, here's another one. This is one I'm actually curious to know. 7900 XTX. What's the total supply, global supply of the, or I guess the sales volume of the, I think it's discontinued, but I'm curious to know, like, how many of those sold, because I know people seem to think that the XTX sold really well and the RTX 4080 sold really poorly. When the reality, if I had to guess, I think the 4080 outsold the XTX by a ton. A ton. Even though the XTX was better. The XTX was the better buy. You know why? 24 gigs of VRAM. That's why. Versus 16. One of them's going to age a lot better than the other. And we're already seeing that play out now. Yeah, do that one. XTX versus 4080. I'm willing to bet the 4080 outsold the XTX by a ton. Have you messed around with RAID options on the... I have not done any RAID on consumer desktop in a long time. I mean, you can try to play around with it. Personally, to be honest with you, I just think that M.2s today are so fast that there's not really much benefit to doing RAID. Especially RAID 0. I mean, most of the time, like, SSDs are very reliable now compared to spindle drives. That RAID 0 is a thing you can do, but it's like, I don't know if it's worth doing. binding all of your 4 M.2 drives all together on that card as a single drive. You can do it. It's just I don't know if there's a reason to do it. The reason why I don't like to do it is because the way I see it is I like to have okay, I mean I'll tell you, like, I personally have the what is it, Asus. Did I do a video about it? Maybe I didn't. I don't remember if I did a video about it. Asus Hyper M.2 Gen 4. I have this card. I know there's a Gen 5 variant, but I don't have the Gen 5 one. I have the Gen 4 one. So I have this. And I have this in my Threadripper computer at the very, very bottom of the motherboard, on the very last PCIe slot, because that's a Gen 4 X16 slot. And I'm running 4 SSDs. I've got 4 crucial P3 plus SSDs in here. And they're not in RAID. I just run them as 4 individual drives. I think it's like I have J, K, L, M. I have a J drive, a K drive, an L drive, and an M drive. All 4 of them are separate drives in Windows. And the reason why I like doing that is because that way, like, because I do video editing, for example, like I'll have the raw footage from the camera that's unedited. So, like, for example, the Thunderbolt video that I made this week, the Thunderbolt 5 video that we filmed and edited this week and uploaded on the channel, the raw footage would be like on the J drive. And then the K drive would have the cut, edited, final video that goes to YouTube. And then the other 2 drives would be like Steam, Steam games or whatever, or, like the caching or whatever. So it's like, that's basically how I would use it. I like having them as separate drives because it's easy for me to organize, like, this SSD is for this purpose. This SSD is for the raw unedited YouTube videos that are like, it's all the raw footage directly from the camera. The K drive is the edited footage. That's how I do things. That's my workflow. So I don't see a reason to do RAID in this day and age, because it's like, it depends. Like if you organize things by like folders and subdirectories and that sort of thing, then yeah, I guess RAID, I mean, you're going to get better performance if you do RAID really faster. I just don't think it's necessary because Gen 4 SSDs are already so fast, and Gen 5 is even faster, but Gen 5 comes with a lot of, challenges to cool the SSD. But yeah, I mean, that's how I use my Threadripper system. This is the reason why Threadripper is like the king of productivity, because, dude, I can run like 4 of these drives in a Threadripper, and then I also still have 4 more SSDs on the actual Threadripper motherboard itself. And then I've got the Slim SAS for more storage options. Like that's why Threadripper is a productivity beast. That thing is like insane. And then I'm running dual graphics cards in there, and I've got USB4. I've got this in there. I've got this in there for Thunderbolt 4 compatibility. I've got the 4090s in there. I've got the AMD Radeon Pro in there as a second graphics card. So like that thing's a beast, man. Threadripper, if you're into like productivity, if you're a true power user, TRX 50 is like a really, really nice platform. But it is like you have to justify the expenditure for that, because that's a serious platform. It's not some, it's not some gamer, like, oh, I just want to play Call of Duty or PUBG or something. You can do all of those things on Twitter, but it's like, that's not, you don't want to spend that much money just to play Call of Duty, if you know what I'm saying. The motherboard need, what are we doing? Okay. So XTX supply increased 85% in the last 60 days. A mix of new and used. 4080 original, less than 39% same period. And wait, 4080 original, less than 39% same period. With FE are 208% more than XTX. Oh, look at that. So the 4080 The 4080 is 208% more in the market than all 7900 XTXs in the channel today. There you go, people. I told you the 4080 sold more. It's that 208% is kind of like a Captain Ginyu just used the scouter on Goku when he was powering him. Was like, what, this is the real you? Now we know the full power of the 4080 in terms of market share compared to its rival. And see, this is the problem that AMD is up against, guys. This is the problem that AMD is up against. Even though I can pretty much guarantee everyone here, the people who bought the XTX over the people that bought the 4080, the people with the XTX are going to be way happier long term than the people with the 4080. Because that 24 gigs of VRAM and that V6 engine is going to outlast, it's going to age a lot better than that measly 16 gigs on that turbo 4-cylinder, if you know what I'm saying. So, okay, so, oh, that actually reminded me of something that I did want to look into. Computer base GPU IPC RTX 50 versus RDNA 4 or something. No, this is not it. I think it's this one. Now, the question is, okay. So, computer base, this is a German website. And let's see. This is a very good article. This will be the last thing that we talk about on the stream. So the RTX 50, so this German tech publication recently did an incredibly good job revealing the truth. This is what I call secrets revealed when someone does something like this. They took the RTX 50 series and they compared it against the 40 series. Then they took AMD's new Radeon 9000 series, and they compared it to RDNA 3 7000 series to look at the IPC uplift, meaning the architecture by itself. How much did Nvidia improve its architecture going from 40 series to 50 series? And how much did AMD improve their architecture going from RDNA 3 to RDNA 4? And the results are staggering. So I'm just going to summarize it. It's all in German. You can translate it on your browser. But basically, the results are that the RDNA... So let's start with NVIDIA. Here are the results. The difference between the 4070 Ti Super and the 5070 Ti is 1%. It means the IPC, the architectural improvement from the 50 series is 1% better on average in rasterization than the 40 series. 1% faster. Going from gen on gen. And that's at 4K resolution. So you can see here, they tested a bunch of games. They tested Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, God of War Ragnarok, and they found some interesting things. So some of the games, particularly the Sony games, don't scale as well. See, we've got Assassin's Creed Shadows. There's literally no difference. They're literally no different. The 4070 Ti Super and the 5070 Ti perform identically in terms of IPC in Assassin's Creed Shadows. In Black Myth Wukong, the 4070, 1% faster than the 5070 Ti. 4070 Ti Super, I should say. Final Fantasy 16, 4070 Ti Super in 1 percentile. But the average is basically the same. Ghost of Tsushima. Oh yeah, that's right. The Sony games, it did better. So the Sony games, it was doing better. The older generation is doing better. Monster Hunter Wilds is it's barely any different. So that's basically what that says. Ray tracing performance. Ray tracing performance, they're basically identical. So there's really no difference. And then here we got RT. RT. It's slower than the older one in terms of IPC. So the conclusion for the Nvidia cards is that the 50 series makes most of its performance gains not from the architecture, but from clock speed increases, power increases to run the clock speeds at higher speeds, and then also the memory bandwidth by going with GDDR7. That is where the Blackwell cards get their performance uplift, meaning the actual architecture is not contributing to the performance generational uplift at all. It's like barely even any, it's almost identical. Like you never notice the difference on IPC alone. So that's why the conclusion was that it's 1% better. Now, the AMD, hold on, why are they, okay, this is Black Myth Wukong. All right, AMD. Here's where things get really, really interesting. And this is why next year is going to be the showdown. So now we look at how RDNA 4 improved over RDNA 3. And the results are significantly better. So if you look at this, this is strictly only IPC improvement. This is architectural changes. This is not clock speed. This is not like, you know, changing the memory, because they actually didn't change memory. So what's interesting here is the Radeon cards are still using GDDR6. So they didn't change the memory type like Nvidia did. But you can see the architectural improvement. They're getting a 20% architectural improvement in IPC for going from RDNA 3 to RDNA 4. This is a 7600 XT versus a 9060 XT. Also, these GPUs both have 16 gigs of VRAM. And the test is done at 1440p because these GPUs are not going to be doing 4K anytime soon. So you're seeing a 20% uplift. And so on average, it depends on the game. So Final Fantasy 16, there's like a 4. But in all scenarios, the AMD card, the newer AMD card is faster in IPC. That means it's architecture. That's instructions per clock, for those that don't know what that means. That means that the AMD card actually has tangible changes to the architecture that improves the performance by significant amounts. Because remember, this is strictly looking at the IPC improvement. This isn't accounting for running the VRAM at higher speeds for more memory bandwidth, which they do. Like I think the old cards were at like 9,000 megatransfers per second. The new RDNA 4 runs its VRAM at 10,000 megatransfers per second. So it's, you know, there's a memory bandwidth that's not accounted for in this comparison because it's looking at just the IPC. So you have the generational uplift in IPC, then you have more memory spec'd at higher speed, but it's still the same memory. And then you have the clock speed increase. So it gets the full picture. So that's the reason why it's getting these better results, and it's significantly faster than RDNA 3 if you're comparing apples to apples. Now, the ray tracing is where things get insane crazy. The Nvidia cards didn't improve ray tracing performance at all, meaning the 50 series performs exactly the same in path-traced games compared to the 40 series. The only reason why they still are performing better is because, like I just said, they run at higher clock speeds because NVIDIA raised the power limit, so they consume more electricity, and they're using GDDR7 for more memory bandwidth, meaning NVIDIA is basically taking the 40 series and pairing it up with, okay, this is an oversimplification because Blackwell does have more changes to it under the hood, but in general, you can think of the 50 series as nothing more than the 40 series on steroids. Or to put things in another way, the 50 series is basically 40 series with a newer type of VRAM and a higher default power limit. Hence the reason why the 5090 uses so much electricity compared to the 4090 and can actually melt the cables more regularly if left unchecked. Whereas that rarely happened on the 4090 because it just didn't pull that much power by comparison. So the AMD cards, though, 31% improvement in ray tracing performance versus RDNA 3. Whereas 50 series was 0% improvement in ray tracing versus the Lovelace generation. So this is a huge uplift. I highly recommend you guys check out this article from Computer Base. You can use a browser translator to translate it into whatever language if German's not a language you understand. But some of these results are insane. So, like, the really interesting one, like, look at this. Silent Hill in ray tracing. 34% faster in ray tracing performance. Silent Hill was a game that was very hard to run with the ray tracing turned on. But 34% uplift in Silent Hill 2 with ray tracing. Monster Hunter Wilds, even Monster Hunter Wilds. Monster Hunter Wilds RT is really not that hard, but this is still getting a massive 22% uplift. So very, very impressive stuff. So, and then here's where things get really wacky. So here, the geometric mean, 83% faster in pure path tracing performance. So in path tracing, RDNA 4, this is like hardcore full RT. This is like everything is path traced, pure path tracing. Think of it like if you were doing Minecraft with path tracing turned on, or if you were doing Cyberpunk 2077 with the path tracing enabled, like full path tracing. Like, it's insane. 83% faster. 83% gain in path tracing performance on RDNA 4 versus RDNA 3. These are the sort of leaps and bounds of gains that the RDNA architecture has needed. Look at this. Black Myth Wukong at 1440p with full path tracing. 201%. 201% gain going from RDNA 4 from the RDNA 3. This is the sort of architectural improvement that was required to get AMD to catch up. This is what I mean when I said AMD literally jumped 2 generations ahead, because they were always like 1.5 generations behind Nvidia. And now it's funny because it's like this is the classic story of the tortoise and the hare, where in this scenario Nvidia is the rabbit or the hare. They were so far ahead, they were so fast at ray tracing, path tracing. AMD's that slow turtle going all slow with the RT. And it's like, okay, now we went from 40 series to 50 series, and guess what? 0% ray tracing improvements going from RTX 40 to RTX 50. And meanwhile, you're getting insane jumps in path tracing going from RDNA 3 to RDNA 4. This is what I mean when I say next year is going to be the true showdown between Radeon and GeForce, because this is kind of the teaser trailer to show you guys the sort of gains that AMD has made compared to like what Nvidia has basically not changed anything going generation to generation. So I think that 60 series can probably have some tricks up its sleeve in terms of surprising people with some improvements. But the question is, what sort of gains can we expect from Nvidia's new architecture next year? Because I think AMD is capable of some like really, really impressive gains here. It's one of those things where it's like I still view AMD as kind of like this Goku type character, And in this scenario, I see Nvidia as either Frieza or Cell, in the sense that they're kind of the incumbent champion and Goku's the challenger. Meaning, remember when Goku powered up for Captain Ginyu and then Vegeta was like, yeah, you're strong, but Frieza's still like way stronger than you. You know, like that's what I'm saying. So Nvidia could still be so far ahead because they had such a head start in the RT world, the path tracing world especially, that AMD was training in 100 times Earth's normal gravity. AMD was training with King Kai. AMD was training on a spaceship going to Namek. Now AMD is in the hyperbolic time chamber training for the Cell games. So next year is going to be the Cell games. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be really, really interesting for those of you that are really, really into computer hardware. So that is an excellent article from Computer Base. So definitely check this one out because this one shows, this is like the best article that I've seen that really drives home the changes that were made with RDNA 4. They basically say that with RDNA 4, this is the biggest improvement in IPC that they have ever seen from a GPU architecture in a very long time. The last time they saw these sort of gains was when AMD went from GCN to RDNA 1. So from like the Vega 64 or the Vega 56, whatever the equivalent was to the 5700 XT and the 5700, that was when they got similar gains. This is why I was telling you guys earlier this year and last year when we were talking about the 9070 XT, I was telling you guys the 9070 XT is basically a repeat of the 5700 XT. And remember, so now we can use Tech Power Up to illustrate this final point. So let's go here. RX 5700 XT. The 5700 XT from July 7th of 2019. This was the very first RDNA GPU. How does this compare to the 2070? The 2070, 5% faster. According to this, that was the rival GPU of the time, the 2070. So think of it like substitute this for the 9070 XT and substitute the 2070 for the 5070 Ti. So it shows that the board is set up. The chess pieces are already there. Everything is set up for the showdown for next year. Substitute the 2070 as the 5070 Ti. Substitute the 5700 XT for the 9070 XT. And you know what comes after the 5700 XT. The 6800 XT. The 6900 XT. You know what comes after the 2070. The 3080. The 3090. Do you see where this is going? So that means next year is going to be the true showdown. It's going to be just like the 3080 came out. It's going to be 6080. 3080 becomes 6080. And it's like, oh, here comes the challenger. The 6800 XT becomes the new UDNA. Oh, but wait. Nvidia has its trump card, free, or I guess perfect cell, 100%. 6090, perfect cell. And then UDNA Goku powers up. And we know what's going to happen. So that's basically what's going to happen next year. And I'm so glad that this computer-based article exists, because this computer-based article basically validates the Dragon Ball Z analogies that I've been talking about the whole time. It validates everything that I have said in the comparisons that I have made earlier this year before the 9070 XT launched, saying that the 9070 XT is another reset point, just like the 5700 XT was. And this article literally proves that argument. So we'll see what happens next year, because We are currently living in a RTX 20 series versus RDNA 1 era. And next year, we'll see an RTX 30 series versus an RDNA 2 era. If you guys get what I'm saying. So hopefully people understand where I'm going with that argument, with that analogy there, or that, like the analogy of 20 series is to 50 series as RDNA 1 is to RDNA 4. Meaning, next year, 30 series will be to 60 series as RDNA 2 is to whatever the new AMD thing is called. That is the proportion. So I think it's going to be I think it's going to get very interesting. Let's just say, things are going to get very, very interesting next year in the GPU space. It's going to be the clash of the titans. It's going to be a clash of the literal titan GPUs. Like massive, massive GPUs. The red titan and the green titan. And we'll see what the Chinese GPUs do and what Intel decides to do with the Intel GPUs. Because maybe there's going to be an Intel GPU. Like a Krillin or something shows up to like try to fight in as well. Or something. Who knows? Whatever. I think that covers it, though. We kind of talked about this earlier. This is more kind of bad news, I guess, but Intel considers abandoning 18A for 14A. I don't know if they can afford to do that. I mean, this is more bad news. More bad news for Intel, but we'll see. I don't know. They're like off the rails, and they need to somehow like bring a construction crane to pick up the train and put it back on the railroad track. So we'll see what they do with this, because yeah, I heard that 18A was good, but for some reason they're not getting customers. Intel will still keep its promise about that. I don't know. I guess there's something with performance problems or something, but it looks like along with standard 18A, Intel's creating two upgraded versions, 18A-P launching next year and 18A-PT arriving in 2028. What is this? You're talking about Intel? What are we talking about? What are we talking about here? Oh, you're talking about the GPUs that they chose? Let's see. They chose this, and they chose that and this. This is 2048. This is 2048. That's why they did that. No, this is a valid comparison. You know why? Because this is 2048 cores, and this is 2048 cores. 9060 XT is 2048, 128 TMUs, 64 ROPs, 16 gigs of RAM, 128-bit bus. The 7600 XT is 2048 cores, 128 TMUs. They explain that in the article. 64 ROPs, 16. It's exactly the same physical spec. So this is a valid comparison. This is absolutely a valid comparison. That's exactly why they chose the GPUs they chose. Because they're looking at IPC. They're not looking at, memory. This one's using a different memory. This one's using a different. No, they're looking at what changes going from 2048 RDNA 3 cores to 2048 RDNA 4 cores. This is an absolutely valid comparison. This is the way Computer Base did the comparison is excellent. because that is the correct way to do an IPC comparison. They explain that in like the first 2 paragraphs of the article. So that is the validation right there. It is a valid comparison. So we could do the exact same thing with the Nvidia cards that they chose. They chose the, what do they choose? The 4070 Ti Super, and they chose the 5070 Ti. So these GPUs, 8,448 cores. Okay, this one, here's what's even interesting. This is way interesting because look, the 5070 Ti technically has more, but so with the Nvidia one, there was no exact fit. So they had to do a approximate comparison. So, and here's what's funny. They chose the 50 series card technically has more cores than the 40 series card that they chose. And guess what? They still found 0 improvement in path tracing performance going from Lovelace to Blackwell. Despite it having more cores, it didn't even make any difference. Same ROPS, same memory, 256-bit, 256-bit. No, this is absolutely a valid comparison. This is a 100% valid comparison. I mean, I would have done the exact same thing if I had these GPUs to compare. Because this is the closest you can get. Like, what are you going to do? I mean, this is as close as they can possibly do it. And they still found that there was barely any difference. There was like a 1% improvement. The 1% improvement came from the fact that this has more cores. Maybe that's the reason why it had a 1% improvement. Meanwhile, this is exactly the same in terms of the actual physical components, and there's a massive improvement in IPC. The whole point of that article was to show IPC architectural improvement, not clock speed improvement, not node improvement, not memory improvement, because the only reason why the 5070 Ti is faster, and they said this in the article, go read the article. The only reason why the 5070 Ti is actually faster than the 4070 Ti Super is because of GDDR7, so it has more memory bandwidth, and it clocks faster. This thing runs at 2500 megahertz. This thing runs at, oh wait, okay, so I don't know. That says 26. Well, let's look at base. 2340, 2295. So I don't know. Nvidia's speeds are kind of dumb anyway, though, because their boost does whatever they want. It's kind of hilarious. That's the reason why, like, some Nvidia coolers will cause them to boost slightly better than others. So I don't know what the deal is there, but let's look at the clock speeds on this guy. So this guy is 2470. Why is this? Wait, what the heck? This is missing the, hold on, no it's not. 2530. Oh no, 3.1 gigahertz. Yeah, that's faster. Go back and read the article because they explain that they lock the clock speed. By the way, if you didn't read that part, they lock the clock speed. I forgot what the number was. They don't let this thing run at. They don't let the newer AMD, run at like 3 gigahertz, and this guy's only running at like 2.5. No, they lock them to the same speed. That's how they did the test. Same thing with the Nvidia. They locked the Nvidias to the exact same speed using Afterburner. So the whole point of that article is not GDDR6 versus GDDR7. The point is IPC, instructions per clock. What did they actually change? And the point that they're making is based off of running the 2 GPUs at the exact same speed. They're both running at like 2 gigahertz or whatever, and they have the same, almost the same core count. In the case of the AMD, they are the same core count. They literally, it's a 1%. It's 1% for Nvidia. 1% faster. And you know where that 1% comes from? The fact that this has more physical CUDA cores. That's the answer. I just figured it out just looking at this. More CUDA cores, more TMUs. That's your 1%. Just more hardware. The AMD, physically the same everything. Same bus, same memory, same ROPs, everything. And you clock them at the same speed, and the AMD is faster. The new AMD is faster than the old AMD by like 20% in raster and like 80% in ray tracing or path tracing. So, yeah, no, this is a very good. This is a very good article. This is the best article that I've seen that explained, that actually did a proper IPC comparison test. Lock them at a fixed speed, so the newer one can't just boost way beyond the older one, and then see what they actually did. And it looks like AMD RDNA 4 is definitely different from RDNA 3, but Blackwell is basically the same as Ada. Which is true, because that explains why Nvidia doesn't have that many uplifts. That's why everybody was complaining about the 5080 being complete trash. The 5080 was complete, utter garbage, because the most embarrassing thing about the 5080? The fact that the 5080 loses to the 4090 proves that it's complete and utter trash. This is such a disappointment. Nvidia's second fastest card historically is never, ever supposed to lose to their oldest flagship card. That is like a big no-no. That's a no-no in Nvidia's world. You don't make your second fastest new generation card slower than your older flagship. You never ever do that. But nope, they had a big boo-boo this time because they didn't actually change the architecture in any significant way. Hence the reason why it's a massive, massive disappointment. It's a complete waste of money. Case in point. Do we really need to do this? 9080 Ti? Or let's do this. GTX 1070 is greater than the 9080 Ti. The RTX 2080 is faster than the 1080 Ti. The RTX 3080 is faster than the 2080 Ti. The RTX 4080 is faster than the 3090 Ti. Do we really need to go here? RTX 5080 is less than the 4090. Do you see the problem? And Computer Base was like, this doesn't look right. Something's weird here. Let's look at the IPC. Because they stacked GDDR7 on this thing, and it still loses to the 4090. So let's go find the reason for that. I wonder. Oh, it might be IPC or the lack of IPC improvements. "9 months of original like on the Super making." What? You can throw the Supers in here. They're not going to change any of these results. I mean, what are we going to do? The 2080 Super is still faster than the 1080 Ti. The 4080 Super is still faster than the 3090 Ti. That doesn't change anything. There is no 30 Super. So, no. I mean, Computer-Based article is golden, man. That is the type of tech journalism that we don't have enough of in this industry. Like, that sort of, like, deep dive look at, hey, let's look at if we lock the clock speed, and if we look at like architectural versus architecture, like what is actually different here. So one of the guys in I think it was Matt, fake frames hater, brought this to my attention on one of the streams earlier this week. So thanks for bringing this to my attention, because I did look at it, but I forgot about it. But when you mentioned it, I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, I need to talk about that. And I almost forgot about it again. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, because I almost forgot to mention this on this stream, and I wanted to mention that. This is why This is why the 50 series is, I've been seeing, as a complete skip for pretty much anyone with a 40 series. Anyone with 40 series, 50 series is a complete and utter disappointment in so many ways. It is a disappointment. And this right here is the epitome, this is the visual representation of how it is a disappointment. The second fastest new NVIDIA card is never supposed to lose to the fastest previous generation card. NVIDIA literally goes out of their way to make that a reality. They went out of their way to make this happen. They went out of their way to make this happen. Even though in the long run, the additional hardware of the 1080 Ti helped that card age so well into the future compared to the 2080, mainly because the 1080 Ti has 11 gigs of VRAM versus 8 gigs of VRAM on a 2080. But, you know, the point still stands. NVIDIA, second fastest NVIDIA at time of new generation launch, is supposed to be faster than the fastest, the flagship of the previous generation. Jensen has said this on stage so many times. Do I need to find the clip of him revealing GTX 1070 and declaring on stage in front of the crowd, GTX 1070, faster than a 980 Ti. Faster than a 980 Ti. And then sure enough it was. $449, Founders Edition, $379 MSRP. Faster than a 980 Ti. We have to look up the clip for that. This is why the 50 series is a massive and utter disappointment for tech enthusiasts. The only reason why the 5090 is the only one that manages to scrape by with its scuffs, with its battle wounds, because it's uncontested. It's because it's the last one on the, it's like at the top of the list. It's the only one that's like, oh, it's the fastest, because there's literally nothing there. So it's like, whatever. That's the only one that gets a pass in terms of the entire 50 series generation. And even then, it's not that impressive, because what do they have to do? Basically, the 5090 is a 4090 pumped so full of steroids. It's like a massive bodybuilder version of a 4090. The thing like eats watts constantly and generates so much heat and runs the risk of burning up the connector as a result. So it's literally the only one that is somewhat impressive, but even then it's really not that impressive. When you look at 4090 versus 3090 or 3090 Ti, and then you look at like 5090 versus 4090, yeah, no, it's not that impressive. See, but it's the only one, because like, oh, it's the last one on the list, and there's like really nothing else up there, so I guess it's... But the rest of the entire, like I've been saying from the start, like from 5080 down, the whole thing is like trash. The whole thing is trash. No improvement, just nothing. Nothing. Yeah, HEZ, pumped with 32 gigs of GDDR7 and nothing, yeah. Well, it's got more cores on there. They've dumped a bunch of cores on there. And that's why it heats up the chip all the way and does actually pull all the watts. Exactly. And that's the whole point of the computer-based article. That is literally their entire argument. They're saying that the 50 series is literally like nothing. The uplifts come from GDDR7 and pump more wattage through the chip and, you know, blast power at it and throw new GDDR7 on there and call it a day. That's basically what it is. No path tracing improvement, no ray tracing improvement, just higher clock speed, newer RAM. I'm done. Sell it for $3,000 or $2,500 July 4th sale for people in America, whatever. And that's it. That's the 5090, and then like everything else just falls into place. I mean, guys, remember people were like, "Oh, they're charging less money. They're charging less money for the The 5070 Ti. The 5070 Ti. 5070 Ti. MSRP 449. Oh, thank you. Oh, Nvidia is so generous. It's so generous. So generous. So generous. When the introductory price of the 4070 Ti was $899. It's like, are you serious? Oh, look, I wonder why it's less money. Oh, could it be that they didn't do anything? What? Oh, they didn't do anything. Now we know. Thanks, Computer Base, for Secrets Revealed. Dragon Ball Z on Namek Saga. Dodoria revealed all the secrets. Does anybody remember this? Oh, this was you remember this thing's original name was the fake 4080. The 4080 12 gig for $900. What a deal. Remember that? 2 years later, change nothing but reduce the price by like $150. People will buy it in droves. And they are actually, which is pathetic, but yeah. Oh man, that's so sad. Nvidia wanted to produce a high volume Pro Carbon Blackwell. There was already wait, what? Oh. Okay. Well, you know what? Okay. That's interesting. So let me do something here. RTX ADA 6000. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay, check this out. This is funny. Okay, look at this, guys. Look at this. Remember this? Remember this? The 4090 Ti. Oh, look, the 4090 Ti. Oh, I can't believe it. Oh, it actually exists. More secrets revealed on this stream. There is a 4090 Ti. Oh, look. The 4090 Ti is here. Oh, the 4090 Ti. Check this out. The 5090 is 19% faster than the 4090 Ti. Wow. Whopping 19% faster. Going to the 5090, $3,000 over the 4090 Ti. Oh, generational uplift. Oh, 19%. Ooh. 32 gigs of VRAM versus 48 gigs of VRAM. 32 gig GDDR7 versus 48 gig GDDR6. 19% faster. Incredible. What a generational uplift. Wow. This is like going from, what is this? This is like going from the, man, what's a card that's like 20% different? Like the, this is like going from what? The 30, this is like the 7900 XT to the XTX or something. Okay, maybe, well, no, that's more like 30%. What the heck? That's the difference? Do you see why this is a complete skip? GDR7 is doing the heavy lift. Yeah, it is. Hold on, this thing has 18,000. And did I put the other one in here? No. This one 21,000. Oh well, no, this does have more. This has more CUDA cores. Yeah. 18,000 versus 21,700. So that's like what? That's 3,600 more CUDA cores. It's got more TMUs. It's got more. Well, it has less ROPs, which is interesting. It has less ROPs. Less ROPs. But more TMUs. Oh, but it's a 512. This is a 512 bit. This is a 384-bit. This is basically 4090 with more cores, guys. That's all this is. This is 4090 Ti. We talked about 4090 Ti. I mean, I remember when people came into the stream and I'm like, hey guys, you know there's a 4090 Ti, and the people who are like new to the channel, we were talking about 4090 Ti, and people were like, there's no 4090 Ti. I'm like, yeah, there is. Here it is. And they're like, what? Yeah. The problem is there's also that one, well, it's hard to get it to show up on the Tech Power Up thing, so I can't really show like that Blackwell Pro whatever Titan thing, that $8,500 card. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you guys can see, yeah, okay, we can call that 19, or we can round that up to 20% if we're being favorable to the 5090, but yeah, like 20% or whatever. Like, okay, is that worth a generational uplift? I don't know about that. Tech Power Up, as far as I know, is not Hardware Unboxed. Hardware Unboxed is Tech Spot, if you need to know. Tech Spot. This is Hardware Unboxed's publication company that they work with, not Tech Power Up. Tech Power Up is different. No, if you're talking about Hardware Unboxed, the guy is based in Australia. Tech Spot is their publication. Tech Power Up has nothing to do with Hardware Unboxed. I can guarantee that. The point still stands. The architecture improvement was nothing more cute. Yeah. All right. Well, that was kind of like the bonus segment for this episode of Tech Thursdays, but I think that added like a whole nother hour to the stream almost. But yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're at the end now. But you guys can see this is the reason why the 50 series. I think it's pretty clear the 50 series is a disappointing generation from Nvidia. The last generation that was somewhat disappointing in a similar vein was, you guessed it, the 20 series Nvidia cards. And this is the reason why we are reliving 2019 all over again. Because, remember what I said earlier, the 5700 XT was around here. It had to deal with the 20 series. It came out like after the 20 series. It was between the 20 and 30 series. So the 5700 XT had to compete with the RTX 2070. That was its rival when it launched. And then actually, I think the 2070 Super, if I'm not mistaken, came out somewhere around the similar time too, later on. The 9070 XT versus the RTX 5070 Ti. So we are repeating history. We are living in an era, we're basically living where the 50 series Nvidia is nothing more than the 20 series. It's like, it's very similar in vibe to the 20 series Nvidia. 20 series was considered a disappointing generation for most tech enthusiasts. 2080 Ti was a disappointment. But at least the 2080 was at least equal, if not slightly better than the 1080 Ti. Here, the 5080 always loses to the 4090. So it's like even worse in that regard. So this is why I'm telling you, we are set up to witness the clash of the big GPUs next year. Because we're kind of in this era where it's like, the lame 20 series is basically reincarnated as the lame 50 series. And then RDNA 1 has been reincarnated as RDNA 4, which means next year you will see the question mark versus the RTX 6090 and the question mark versus the RTX 6080. This is bound to occur next year. There will be a response from AMD because we are literally repeating history here with these GPUs. In hindsight, AMD could have easily released... I don't know in what way they could have easily released a higher-end GPU. I don't think they had a higher-end GPU to release. It's not ready. They have one. It's not coming out until the end of next year. It is on the board. It is known as question mark, question mark, question mark. There's more than one of them. But those cards will definitely beat the 5080 and the 5090 next year because those guys set the bar so low that they don't have to use that Toy Story reference. They're not aiming for the truck. And the truck is the 5090 and the 5080. For those that watched Toy Story and know what that analogy is referring to. So, they're going beyond that. Yeah. So Nvidia set the bar so low going into next generation that it's going to be pretty easy for both AMD and Nvidia to impress the gamer public because 50 series is so bad that anything from 60 series and anything from AMD at this point is going to be miles ahead of those cards, including the 5090. The 5090 is also going to be toppled by both AMD and Nvidia next year. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. If you're new to the channel, we do these Tech Thursdays live streams every Thursday, so you probably, if you like this sort of weird, quirky, open-ended live stream discussion format like this, you probably want to get subscribed to the channel or hit the bell icon to get notified when I start these live streams. Sometimes we do gaming live streams, and those are at random. Those are based off of my availability. So if you have the bell icon, the notifications turned on, you will probably get notified. All right, at least you're supposed to get notified when I go live. That's the idea behind that. But otherwise, you can expect to see the Tech Thursdays live streams every Thursday. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week, or I will see you guys this weekend on one of the gaming live streams. Until then, take care, and I will see you then.